Introduction. Penny's adventures come with their own killer soundtrack. For Tailed, Penny's playlist will have you tapping your feet and piecing together clues alongside her and Spades, her cat. Just plug these tracks into your favorite music app and get ready to dive into the fun. Alfred Hitchcock theme song. We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. Burning for You by Blue Oyster Cult. Achy Breaky Heart by Billy Ray Cyrus. Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler. Little Red Riding Hood by Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. Enjoy rocking out and sleuthing with Penny. Chapter 1. That smell! I hooted. My cat Spades licked his paws and swiped at his eyes. He must have agreed with me. I don't think I'll ever get used to that smell. I tugged on the newest addition to my small wardrobe, a pair of muck boots. They were much more comfortable than I'd first expected. Sky blue with brown and white goats decorating their waterproof skin. They wouldn't have been my choice in footwear. Yet, they were free and kept my sneakers clear of poo. I was thankful for them. I'd hosed them off before entering Godzilla, my VW bus turned into a tiny house. The smell wasn't wafting from them. Nope, it was coming from outside. Still, what did I expect? I was working on a farm inhabited by goats. I slid open the back door of the van and hung my feet over the side. Spades shimmied up at me. He rubbed his spine along my wrist as he passed. Last night's chill was turning into a foggy, damp day. My snarky cat didn't want my portable heat to leave him trapped inside my frigid van. If he'd been a dog, I would have dressed him in a sweater. But, being a cat, he'd shredded my first attempt at bracing him against the cold. I gave the scruff of his neck a long scratch before nudging him back into Godzilla. He meowed a question at me. "It's wet," I answered. "You'd be miserable following me around." He snorted in agreement. Flicking his long black tail, Spades curled himself into a tight coil as he burrowed beneath my favorite blanket. Outside, a tiny sliver of sun sliced through the gray morning. I stretched under its migrant heat. Colleen Green waved at me from her back porch. "Penny," she called to me. "Breakfast!" I returned the wave and gave her a thumbs up. After another second of working the knots out of my morning muscles, I tugged my slicker around me and slogged on toward my newest employer. Colleen Green was the relative of a friend, or a sort of friend. After the Raven of Death ruined that relationship, I was sent on my way, but not without a recommendation and a new job. Things went like that for me. Since I was 6, Death continued to bless me with sneak peeks into the near future via sightings or omens that I called glimpses. These glimpses could be of anything. However, they never led to anything good. Whoever the glimpses were designed for had 24 hours before disaster, or worse, landed in their lap. The most horrid of these glimpses was the Raven. A Raven sighting always meant death and, usually, murder. After retaking flight, the Raven often left me alone with no explanation of what had happened and with no one dumb enough to keep me as a friend. 3 people stood by me. Mr. Joe, my old boss, kept in touch on a monthly basis. He held my mail and sometimes sent me his famous fudge. Then there was TC and Scrub. They recorded a weekly podcast about the paranormal. I was their one paid guest. Other than that, whenever my glimpses struck, I was asked or forced to leave town. My connections and friendships were left behind. I was on my own. Except for Spades, of course. Spades was my constant companion. Colleen's aunt had warned her of my strangeness before I headed to the farm. My new boss thought the whole thing was ridiculous and offered me a job anyway. I was happy to have it, even if it was in the middle of a field of goat pellets. "Morning!" Colleen smiled her greeting over a massive mug of coffee. She nodded her head toward her screen door. "Oatmeal's on the stove. Bread is by the toaster. Help yourself," she told me. She'd said the same thing in the same order for days. "Thank you so much," I repeated, like all the other mornings. Breakfast was part of my pay. Colleen wasn't as hospitable or homey as her aunt had been, but she was fair and more than a little plucky. I entered the large kitchen. An unbidden sigh slipped from my lips. It was intoxicatingly toasty in Colleen's house. I wanted nothing more than to curl up in a chair and sleep. Instead, I scooped myself a bowl of oatmeal and tossed a piece of bread into the toaster. "Hiya," Maddie for short, said as she walked into the kitchen. "Good morning, Maddie," I returned. Maddie was also hired as part-time help on Colleen's farm. The goat farm was on the smaller side as far as farms were concerned. Milk, cheese, and meat were its main wares. Colleen also made soap from her goat's milk. She handled that job on her own most of the time. However, a broken hip from an accident a few weeks back kept her from frolicking with her goats. Judging by the swagger in her speech, she'd soon be back to rocking the goat milk world on her terms. For the time being, Maddie, Scarlett, and I were her primary helpers. Scarlett, Colleen's regular helper, was the last to grace the cinnamon-scented kitchen. She grumbled her way to the coffee pot and poured most of it into a jumbo thermos. It would get her through the day, even if it left the rest of us with less than a cup's worth. Maddie watched, slack-jawed, as Scarlett hoarded the coffee, her fists clenched on her hips. I could tell she wanted to give Scarlett lip, but it wouldn't do any good. Maddie and I were pit stop employees. Our vote meant nothing, especially when we're arguing over coffee and breakfast. Maddie's green eyes flashed to mine. I winked at her. My coffee was much better than Colleen's. I'd make Maddie a fresh pot later in the afternoon. However, I'd send it with her in a to-go mug. Because of my pesky raven friend, hanging out with me could very well be a death sentence. Maddie was sweet. I didn't want to put her in harm's way, not if I could help it. Colleen limped into the kitchen just as I sat down and began eating. She tottered over toward the coffee machine and snorted when she spotted the empty carafe. Then, leaning against the counter, she started the morning meeting. "We're moving the goats from the back field to the front fields today. It shouldn't take long. First, of course, the milking will need to be done. Most of the milk will go into the fridge at the dairy shed. We'll need at least a quarter of it frozen in the ice trays. Tomorrow, we'll start the soaps." Scarlett grinned as she sipped her coffee and nibbled on her toast. "For which vendors?" "Online orders," Colleen answered. "Anything we have left, we'll save for the mid-month market." "What's the mid-month market?" I whispered to Maddie, who'd worked with Colleen before. "It's the local freestanding market in the center lawn of town," Maddie whispered back before adding a dollop of butter to her oatmeal. Scarlett stared out of the back door and across the porch. "Who the heck is that?" she pointed, still cradling her stockpile of coffee. Colleen lumbered nearer to Scarlett. She squinted out at the fields. "That better not be," she started. Maddie scooted her chair closer to mine. "Colleen has a stalker." "Colleen?" I asked. "Or Scarlett," she admitted. "I'm not sure which. He pops up on the edge of a field or by a fence now and then, leering with binoculars." "Have you seen him?" I asked. I had chills, even as the warm oatmeal heated up my stomach. Maddie shrugged. "I thought I did once. It was just Curry, the postal worker." Colleen screamed obscenities from her porch and chucked her breakfast bowl across the dewy grass. I startled. If breakfast was any indicator, the day was going to be a strange one. Maddie averted her eyes from Colleen's outburst. I followed suit. We both hurried to finish our oatmeal and get the day's work started, far from the raging Colleen. Chapter 2. I never thought I would ever know how to milk a goat. As a child, in foster homes, I'd loved the novel Heidi. Often I dreamed I had a crotchety old grandfather who would rescue me from the grimy side of life. I imagined bounding up flower-laced mountains as bell-wearing goats followed me. Every daydream ended in a marred mess. Even if I had a scruffy-looking but tender-hearted grandfather, I could never run away to live with him, not without my sister, Christy. Since I didn't know, even then, where she was, I was trapped, biding my time in foster home after foster home. Now, I'd made it into my goat-laden dreams. I opened the third gate to the back field. Field was a generous name for the paddock. They might have had lots of room to move, but instead, they huddled around each other, fighting over who was highest on the small boulder in the center of the pen. These goats were waiting for next month to breed and were kept separate from the milking goats. I hadn't known goats could be bred more than once a year. Colleen reassured me she could make the most indignant of goats get in the mood. I took her word for it. Scarlett explained the morning jobs in an overabundance of detail. She then took up residence on a wooden bench near the center of Colleen's lot. She rotated between sipping on her coffee and glaring at Maddie and me. Ignore her, I told Maddie, who fretted over the scrutiny. She shook stress from her shoulders and sighed. I'm trying. She's just so attentive. That's her job, isn't it? Maddie pouted. Not before Colleen injured her hip. I walked into the pen, calling my favorite of the goats. Tofu ran and skipped sideways, but ignored me. She'd come to me when she thought I had a treat for her, which, of course, I did. In the small sack wrapped around my shoulder were 2 scoops of goat snacks, just waiting for obedient goats. I snickered at the oxymoron. Obedient goats were as uncommon as friendly omens. I rattled the thoughts of the raven from my mind and continued onward into the herd. I could hear Maddie following me. Have you made soap with Colleen before? Sure, Maddie said. Bars, not anything fancy. I'm not sure what Colleen's got planned for tomorrow. We walked around the back of the grouping and started shushing the goats toward the gate. 3 goats are missing, Maddie fussed. I bet they're stuck in the gate. I'll go check. Maddie frowned. She was annoyed by Colleen's choice of fencing. I hope she gets it fixed this season. They're going to get hurt if they keep getting stuck. I smiled. I couldn't imagine any of Colleen's goats being smart enough to keep out of fencing of any size. They could not resist the grass on the other side of the fence. A lot like people, I thought. Sure enough, in the back corner of the lot, Merryweather and Fauna were stuck. Twinkle, Merryweather's runt of a daughter, lingered, bleating behind the pair of naughty nannies. She hurried up to me, nudging my calf with her head. It's okay, I said, reaching down to scratch Twinkle's back. I'm here. A bundle of nervous energy, the doe leapt in front of me, blocking my work. I shoved her away with a tender hand before freeing her mother. The cold air amplified the freezing feel of the fence metal. The icy sting attacked my skin through my gloves. I pulled the wire wide enough to coax Merryweather's head back to the right side of the fence. There you go, girl, I said. Mama Goat snuggled with her grown daughter. I scooted over toward Fauna and was glad to see it was just her collar stuck on the fence. It took a moment to free her. She wasn't as grateful as Merryweather. She rammed me in the stomach with her flop-eared head before scampering off toward the rest of the goats. I was knocked onto my bum. I sat there for a moment when a rustling sound came from nearby. Colleen's property bordered the backcountry road to town, flanked by tall trees. It wasn't unusual to spot the flash of an old truck or two barreling down the lane, leaving dust twisters in its wake. I couldn't see a vehicle of any kind. Convinced I was paranoid from the morning's stalker moment, I dusted myself off and hustled back to Maddie. Even if the noise had been fictitious, that didn't mean I had to find out for sure. Maddie examined my expression after getting the goats inside. If rain was headed this way, the goats needed to get out of the cold. The floppy-eared bunch bundled around a hay roll in between the stalls. They'd stay warm and well-fed in the barn. Is something bothering you? She asked. Sweetness sparkled in Maddie's inexperienced eyes. Something was always bothering me. Death stalked me. However, I wasn't about to get into that mess with Maddie. Just tired, I said. It's nothing a fresh dose of coffee won't fix. Chapter 3. With a couple of hours to kill before the evening milking, Maddie and I met up by Godzilla. I offered her a fresh pour from my French press. She accepted it with glee. We then sat on the edge of my van, on top of a few old flannel blankets I'd picked up for picnics. Spades explored the grass nearby. The forecasted rain fled farther south than anticipated. It left a misty chill in its wake. The goats would be free to roam by morning. I would invite you in, I said, being the clumsy hostess that I was. Maddie waved a hand in dismissal. Are you kidding me? We're both covered in goat droppings and whatnot. I'm just happy to hang out. I grinned. I didn't want Maddie to get too close. As always, I had to be careful not to transpose my gift onto unsuspecting acquaintances. My heart went out to Maddie. Loneliness freckled her smile. She lived in town and wasn't used to being away from her family. She explained as much as she blew steam from the top of her mug of black coffee. Since Vinny needs the truck for evening classes, I'm stuck here for the duration. Though I get a momentary reprieve on Sundays. Sundays? I asked. What happens on Sundays? Maddie snickered. Church. Vinny picks me up and I spend the day at home with my family. Most of the time I do laundry and nap. Sometimes we all have time to play a game of cards. My eyebrows arched. Your entire family plays cards together? Maddie grinned and sipped her coffee. All 7 of us, unless Chris is home. How is that different? When Chris is home, we play Clue, Maddie explained. Her family sounded nice. Her mom and dad were still together and living. 3 older siblings carved out lives for themselves close to town. Her oldest brother, Christopher, went away to school, but found the time to swing by now and again. Maddie was the youngest. She worked part-time as she saved up for her next grown-up decision. Who knows what I'll do with my life, she said, excitement widening her eyes. Maybe I'll score myself a tiny house, like you, and drive around seeking adventure. I choked on my coffee. Was that what she thought I was doing? It's not as glamorous as I make it appear. I laughed. Glamorous. Yeah, right. If Maddie only knew. I don't think I could tolerate being alone as much as you can. Her words weren't meant to hurt me, but they jabbed at my core. I didn't like being alone. It was necessary. I frowned. It's not all it's cracked up to be. Maddie took a long drink of her coffee. What makes this so much better than Colleen's? She questioned as she held up her mug. Drugs? Chocolate? Cinnamon? I chuckled, happy for the change in subject. Let's say it's one good thing I took away from my many glamorous jobs as a grunt. Many jobs? She repeated. Maddie's eyebrow peaked. That's awesome. No, not really. I'm always the last to do anything at my house. Last to graduate, last to drive, last to get a job. I'd love to be the first at something sometime. Families are a major drain on one's pride. Pride? I asked. I thought over Maddie's pouty words. Maddie was humble, allowing Colleen and Scarlett to teach and reteach her the same tasks without a single complaint. She didn't argue over Scarlett stealing the coffee or snagging the best chair at the table. She wasn't the gloating type. She was confident. Maddie seemed to know who she was and what she was worth. I couldn't help but feel a teeny twinge of envy. Family life hadn't been the sock to self-esteem she'd like me to believe. Sure, she may be the last man on the totem pole, but she wasn't neglected or unseen. She knew her family loved her. Every time she spoke of them, she lit up. Maddie's family was a favorite part of her life. Vagabond van dwelling wasn't the life for her. I'll teach you how to roast coffee beans if you'd like, I said. There's nothing to it. That's what makes this so yummy? You roast your own beans? I nodded. That and the old school press. Sure, I'd love to learn. I'll be the official bean roaster of our family. She downed the rest of her coffee just as Spades scampered back to the van and leapt inside. Welcome back, I told him. He allowed me to give him a quick head-to-tail rub-down before taking his spot on the passenger seat. Maddie set her mug on the rim of the van and hopped down. I've got to go check in with Mom before milking. Maddie blushed. She likes to hear from me every day. Our calls can last for an hour or more. She was embarrassed. I was jealous. Okay, I said. See you at the barn. Maddie waved behind her as she hurried to the dairy shed to make her call. I sighed. I had my own phone call to make. Chapter 4. Since the last fiasco, I'd been more cautious about talking with TC and Scrub. TC especially. I was letting him get too close. It didn't matter if his heart pattered for me the same way mine was skipping for him. This was about his safety, not feelings. I'd kept our calls to podcast business and to finding Christy. It made me sad to speak with TC and hear his accent drag with worry. However, finding my sister was worth the turmoil. As long as I kept TC at a safe distance, I could accept his help without putting him at risk of the Raven. During my stay at Colleen's, I'd skipped 2 planned calls. I begged off via text messages. Last month, TC and I chatted almost every day, sometimes twice a day. He might have come looking for in-person contact if I put him off any longer. Scheduling his call when milking was coming up was a perfect solution. It meant I couldn't stay on the line even if I wanted. I tossed Maddie's mug in a plastic bin that I used for dirty dishes. I'd wash it in the morning. Then I pulled the van door closed. Wrapped in my picnic blanket, I dialed the number I knew even without speed dial. Hello? A voice answered. It wasn't TC who answered his phone. Scrub's voice was low and scratchy. Are you okay? I asked. I'd never heard TC's sidekick sound as disinterested as he did at that moment. Penny? Yes, it's me. You had us worried. Scrub's voice was still well below its average level of enthusiasm and volume. Why are you whispering? I asked. I wanted a moment to talk to you, alone, he said. I cringed inside. If the boss man heard you were on the phone, he'd come running, and we'd never get a chance to talk. I swallowed down the foreboding lingering in my stomach. Okay, shoot. TC has been frantic, questioning himself, wondering what he did to push you back or scare you. And when he's that concerned, it worries me. So tell me, what's going on? I flushed. TC's been frantic? Over me? Or because his new podcast hook wasn't returning his texts? I hadn't ditched the work portion of our relationship, even if I had cut down on the personal stuff. I didn't break my word lightly, if ever. You know what's been going on, I whispered back to Scrub. The Raven? Of course, I said, a little taken aback by the accusatory tone in Scrub's voice. I don't want to put you or TC at risk, more than you already are. About that, Scrub said. From the letters we've received, your talent has a proximity limit. I figure as long as we can stay away from you, physically, we should be good. I sighed. There's just not enough to be sure. Scrub paused before replying. I think I hear TC. Really quick, before he walks in. His whisper dropped lower. I tried to lean into his words, even though that made little sense. TC and I, we figure we're safe, at least from a distance. This not calling stuff and not returning messages, it's not great on the boss. He's too nice of a guy to trail along. Do you know what I'm saying? I did. Still, I couldn't help how things were. I couldn't stop the raven or tell him who to kill and who to save. If I had any power over the blasted bird, I would have exercised it long ago. I couldn't help if TC felt strung along. I had to make the best decisions I knew how to make, even when they hurt others. Even if the hurt they caused hurt me all the more. I'll do my best, I answered Scrub without a promise in my words. It was all I could do and all I ever did. Okay. Scrub pondered over our chat. That'll do. For now. It was strange for Scrub to act so suspicious of me, or ominous in our conversation. He'd always been polite and encouraging. Perhaps not as much as TC had been, but he was never rude and never dismissive. Had my neglect already hurt TC? If that thought made me sad, the next one depressed me even more. Maybe hurting TC was a good thing. Perhaps it would change his mind about me and keep him from being marked by the raven. My chest tightened. I didn't know if I could do that to anyone, let alone TC. I listened while Scrub pulled the phone away from his mouth and called out to TC. All my instincts about keeping the man at an emotional arm's length melted away the moment I heard him inhale before he said hello. Hello, Penny? TC's slight British accent flooded the line. All sense left me. Hi, TC, I said feebly. No video chat today? He asked. TC preferred a face-to-face call to a vocal discord. I ran a hand over my hair. Maddie hadn't acted like I was a mess. However, she'd been herding goats most of the day, just as I'd been doing. I let my anxiety shrug off. Sure, let me get set up, I said. TC chuckled when I agreed to a video call. I settled my phone in its cradle and cozied myself onto the couch. Spades knew the routine. He sauntered over and curled around my feet. I hit the button. TC's wild chestnut hair overtook a third of the screen. His bespectacled face greeted me with a wide smile. My cheeks heated. Your hair's fading, he said. I reached up and patted my messy mop of a ponytail. It had gone from a vibrant plum to a more subtle violet. Red undertones snuck through, creating a mosaic effect. TC, not great at polite small talk, turned towards Scrub and back to me. He promises to tell me if I'm rude. My smile widened. You weren't rude, I reassured him. His grin echoed mine, and we sat in a strange silence, staring at each other through the phone screen. Scrub cleared his throat. We haven't got all day. He snapped at TC, but winked at me. I blinked back to reality. Neither do I said. Evening milking is in less than an hour. TC slapped his hands together. The sound bounced around the van. Spades yowled and padded away from me in a huff. Let's get started. I settled back into the couch cushion. TC and Scrub had agreed to help me find Christy, my twin sister. So far, we hadn't carved out the time to talk about her. Actually, I hadn't carved out the time. Talking about Christy hurt. A lot. Sharing her with TC and Scrub was scary. You ready? TC's voice grew softer. He switched on his lilting, lulling tone. TC reserved it for times he thought I was a raw bundle of nerves. The sound soaked into my spine. I was hooked. And it was terrifying. Not at all, I sighed. Tears stung the back of my eyes. Scrub interjected from the background. Take your time, Penny. This doesn't need to happen all at once. I swallowed. Scrub was right, of course. I didn't know if I'd be able to say it all in one sitting, even if I could remember it all. Still, it was time to rip off the bandage. TC will ask the questions to get you going. I'll take notes. None of this is going on the podcast, he assured. We'd already agreed to privacy. Still, it was sweet for Scrub to reassure me. Got it, I said, My voice was a shell of itself. TC nodded toward me. "We are just going to start with the basics. Her name?" "Christy Nicols," I said. And then the memories overran me. Chapter 5. I'd cried myself numb, like a complete bumbling idiot in front of TC and Scrub. I dragged myself to the milking stalls and plopped onto my stool. Maddie would be along any minute with 15 needy goats trailing behind her. A chill washed through the barn as the sky went purple. I looked out over the fields. My thoughts lingered around my long-lost sister. Was she happy and safe? I spent all my wishes begging fate that she was. A sense of warmth and peace spiraled inside my chest. A fleeting feeling that all was well. Then I took a moment to fawn over the twilight sky, which was now cluttered with raven-shaped clouds. I slipped off my stool. "Are you okay?" Maddie asked. I hadn't heard her pat up behind me. "What are you looking at?" She leaned down and peered over my shoulder and gazed out into the distance. "That cloud," I said. Maybe if Maddie saw the raven too, it really was just a cloud and not a harbinger of doom. "Those little ones all clustered together?" she asked. "They look like stormtrooper helmets in a line," she remarked. The Star Wars reference made me smile, even if the omen made me skittish. "No, but I see those too." Maddie whistled. "Forgot the goats!" She slapped her thigh in frustration. "Be right back." I nodded and retook my place on the stool. All the while, I watched the raven clouds dissipate and drift off into the night sky. The raven had done strange things before, but it would generally mark a person or a group. Vague references to disaster weren't the usual. I worried about the unknowns. Tofu clopped up the milking ramp and went to town, eating her grain. I stroked her belly before placing the bucket beneath her. After sterilizing her udders and inspecting them, I started milking. I squirted a few tugs of milk into the strip cup and examined the color. Tofu was good to go. The routine was cathartic. Beside me, Maddie took Snowflake up the other stand and did the same. She began humming. It wasn't unlike her to sing while we milked. It helped keep the left hand, right hand motions in sync and made the chore much more fun. However, once the raven popped up, songs became clues of what was to come. I often shared these nuggets with TC and Scrub. Then we'd begin the mostly unsuccessful mission to stop death from harvesting one of my acquaintances. Lyrics led to fatal forebodings. I was thrilled when Maddie began humming instead of singing, until I heard the song she was reproducing. Bum, bum, da-da-da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. Maddie sang and aimed 2 heavy jets of milk into the pail, adding the last beats of the melody. Chills scattered across my skin as Maddie continued to milk Snowflake to Alfred Hitchcock's theme song. I couldn't fathom what the song might mean. Given its mascot, it couldn't be anything good. Chapter 6. After saying a quick goodnight to Maddie, I rushed to Godzilla and locked myself inside. The raven had never made such a conspicuous and all-encompassing statement before. There was no clear victim and no apparent motive or means. All I had to go on was a creepy theme song from the 60s and a macabre cloud. I tossed myself onto my couch/pull-out bed. Spades hurried to shuffle out of my way. Before I could get to any good wallowing, he was pestering me to let him out. I pushed open the small triangular window on the driver's side door. My wild, spirited black cat shoved himself through the space and went off to stalk in the dark. His long tail swished through the grass and toward the road. I wasn't worried about him being injured. Traffic wasn't a big issue this far out of town. I just wanted him back inside the van so I could weep into my pillow. The raven was ominous enough when he kept to his traditional way of killing people. Dangling signs from the literal sky with the master of suspense as the first puzzle piece was cruel, even for him. My mind flipped through all of the pivotal scenes from the most well-known Hitchcock films. Nothing was off the table. From showers to national monuments, everything was a potential threat. How was I supposed to thwart Alfred Hitchcock? My heart pounded. When Spades launched back into the van, I screeched with terror. Spades arched his back in a defensive strike against whatever he thought was threatening me. Poor kitty, I whispered as I outstretched a shaky hand to stroke him. He shot a stink eye back at me. He hated being called kitty. Before you ask, yes, Spades knew the difference. He sulked. My phone rang. Another screech ripped from my throat. I contained it before it could be classified as blood-curdling. That had to be TC. It was too late in the day for a call from Mr. Joe, my old boss. I'd broke off the previous call so I could go milk. To be frank, it surprised me TC had waited so long to check in. I steadied my breath and answered as calmly as I could. "Hi," I said. "What's wrong?" he asked. TC wasn't fooled. "What happened?" I plopped down on the couch before answering. The same thing that happens every time I land in a new place. "Where did he show up?" "That's the problem," I sighed, still shaky. "He appeared in the sky, not marking anyone in particular." TC was silent. My thoughts raced. Does that mean he's marked all of us? The entire farm? The town? My voice escalated in pitch as images of destruction grew more and more gruesome in my mind. TC didn't answer right away. No condolences ripped from his tongue. No pleas for video chat. This hadn't been the call he'd expected. I waited for him to recalibrate, or pray, or whatever he did during our many moments of awkward silence. "Any clues?" he asked. His voice was frosty and thoughtful. I croaked out the theme song. TC let an audible gasp rattle through the receiver. "Does that mean we're limited to his radio broadcasts and television shows? Or are we supposed to weave through Hitchcock's most popular films as well?" I hadn't added the television show to my catalog of what could be. "Your guess is as good as mine." "What are you going to do?" "I can't protect everyone all at once. With no clear victim, there's nothing I can do except wait," I replied. I despised the helpless feeling that rushed through every cell of my body. My thoughts couldn't keep ahead of the defeat that picked at me. Was this the price of trying to find my sister? More and more people dying all around me? Or was it because I'd enlisted help and had thwarted the raven? "I'll stay on the phone with you for a while," he stated. TC was horrible at hiding his feelings over the phone. He was distraught. His voice crackled with anxiety as he asked, "Has this ever happened before?" "No," I whispered. "I've had omens that referred to large groups or specific places. Obvious, pointed clues backed them up. Not the humming of a horrifying theme song." TC's voice went softer. "Has the raven ever marked you?" My throat tightened. A new fear prickled at the back of my neck. "No," I said. "Not any more than I've explained already. He marks me by hurting my friends." "I'm sorry," he apologized. The feeling in TC's words clawed at me. "I know," I said. "I'm going to snuggle up with Spades and do my best to sleep a bit. Maybe I'll think of something by the morning." "Sounds good," he said. TC didn't hint at goodbye. He was serious. He was going to stay on the phone with me until dawn. "Why don't you tell me more about Christy as you settle in?" Christy. The one subject that both delighted and terrified me. I needed to know she was safe to move on with my life. I fluffed my pillows and curled up into bed. "Where did we leave off?" I asked.
"Her name and birthday, and where you last saw her."
TC yawned. I copied him. "Aunt Susie and Uncle Stone," I whispered in remembrance. Memories of my father's sister and her husband rushed over me. They had been sweet to Christy and me. After Dad died, we lived with them for almost 2 years, I continued. When I was 8, there was a terrible fire. Their house burned down. I pulled Christy out of bed and we stood at the mailbox, watching it burn as fire trucks rolled up to the curb. TC's voice grew thick with sympathy.
"That must have been awful."
My eyes watered. Not as bad as realizing you're the one that caused the fire.
"How did you cause it?"
The raven. It was that fire that pieced things together for me. Although I didn't fully get it until I was 13. The raven destroys everything I touched. Some sort of punishment for something I've done, I guess. I don't know. TC tisked at me. He believed nothing the raven did was my fault, even though I was the common denominator in every bad luck event that surrounded me.
"How did he warn you that time?"
TC asked. I could still see it. The raven interrupted an otherwise ordinary family moment. It was my uncle's birthday. He went to blow out his candles on the cake Christy had made for him, and Aunt Susie knocked his head into the icing. It was funny, for a split second. I could see my 8-year-old self laughing as my sister scowled beside me. All her hard work decorating had been ruined by Aunt Susie's joke.
"Then the raven?"
Yup, in frosting. First on Uncle Stone's face, and then on Aunt Susie's after he kissed her covered in chocolate.
"And the clues?"
I recited the facts as I'd replayed them in my head, as if I was an onlooker and not a participant in the coming crimes. Billy Joel and Blue Oyster Cult. They played during a living room dance party.
"We didn't start the fire, and what else?"
"Burning for you," I said.
"You put all that together at 8 years old?"
I pulled my favorite cotton knit blanket up to my neck and burrowed beneath it, still clutching my phone. No, not then. While the house was burning, Christy started whistling. That reminded me of the songs. It took a few more incidents for me to realize the music predicted the events. I could feel Spades as he nestled onto my ankles. This was his normal going-to-sleep habit. It was a comfort to me when times were hard. I'd almost forgotten what life had been like without him and TC. Those had been dark days when I'd battled the raven all by myself. Old Penny would have fled the second the bird flew into town. Fighting him led to more casualties. Now, I'd become different somehow. Braver. TC didn't ask me to continue the story. There would be another time. If the raven didn't blast through town tornado style, that is. "Tell me about you," I pleaded. I was tired of talking about myself.
TC chuckled. "What do you want to know? I podcast about the paranormal from a studio apartment in a tiny town. I live a pretty sheltered life."
Though the heaviness of tomorrow sat on my chest like a pregnant elephant, a smile crept through the mayhem and fell upon my face. I don't think that's what sheltered means.
"Maybe not,"
he conceded.
"My life before the podcast was a bit more lackluster."
"Tell me about it." I yawned. Sleepiness teased at my head.
"You'll think it's boring,"
TC warned. "I could do with a good dose of boredom," I said. Again, TC's tired laugh warmed my heart.
"Get comfortable. he said, because my life story will make you drift off. I obliged his suggestion. TC and I spent the night together, miles apart. He chatted about his childhood as I rested in the cadence of his voice. Chapter 7. Sunlight weaseled its way beneath my eyelids. I shut them tight, but couldn't keep the morning at bay. I rose, shoving the blanket off of my head and flinging my phone across the van. "What?" A male voice startled through the speakerphone. "TC?" I whispered as I wiped the drool from the corner of my mouth. "I'm so sorry," I said into the phone after I retrieved it. I fell asleep. "No worries," his voice crackled. "So did I." I smiled until I remembered what I was doing on the phone. Just like that, the weight of my situation landed on my shoulders. "How much longer?" I asked TC, knowing he'd have started a countdown from the moment I reported the raven. I loved how steadfast and dependable TC's habits were. 10.5 hours, he said. Give or take. It was always give when it came to the raven. He took with relentless hunger, and I gave with reluctant surrender. I further rubbed the sleep from my eyes. Spades hopped from the bed and scratched at the sliding door. I opened it as my cat squeezed out and the goat smell flooded in. I gagged. Parking Godzilla in the goat field had seemed like a blessing, especially when it came with an electrical plug. I hadn't known then that boy goats stunk with such force. A rotten goat cheese smell married with heavy pheromones permeated the van. My nose wrinkled against the stench. "What's the plan?" he asked. TC ignored my sounds of disgust. "I figure I'm going to head across the street to the wooded area where the cloud was hanging out and see what I can see. Maybe there's something there that will help me figure out what's going on." TC cleared his throat. "Sounds great. Take me with you." "I was hoping you'd say that," I admitted. After triple checking the video was shut off, I tucked the phone in my bra's shoulder strap and hurried into my muck boots. "Here we go," I said. My voice held more resolution than my heart. However, with TC on the line, I wasn't as nervous as I would have been without him. Spades lollygagged around my ankles as I trekked through the yard. Life at the main house appeared to be still sleeping. I was thankful. The fewer people knew of my relationship with death and its minions, the better. My muck boots squished in the dewy grass as I traversed the field. Mustard, one of Colleen's breeding bucks, and his pygmy weather companion, Plum, brushed up against the fence. They followed me, as far as their enclosure would let them, begging for extra grain. They bleated at me before returning to fight over their shelter shed's top. Across the one-lane road was more of Colleen's farm. I slipped on the cobblestone. My boots were great for sludging through muck and mud. However, they had very little in the way of grip on the underneath. Colleen's herd of livestock goats had the run of that side of the road. Maddie tended more to their needs than I did. She also fed their canine protector, Long John. Since we didn't milk them, there wasn't as large a sense of urgency to tend to them. Maddie ensured that they had hay, loose minerals, and fresh-flowing water. Other than that, Scarlet handled their care while Colleen healed up. The raven cloud had hovered just to the south of the fenced-off field. A small patch of trees and shrubs lay under where it had flapped. "I'm there," I whispered to TC. "Be careful," he admonished. "There's some foliage to navigate, but so far, nothing else to see." TC clicked his tongue against his cheek, setting a beat to my adventure. I pushed apart a bramble and stepped into the middle of the wooded area. Spooky wasn't a strong enough adjective for the feelings dredged up by the shadowy overgrowth. My skin screamed at me to hightail it back to the van. I scooted farther into the patch of foliage until the toes of my boots reached a shallow pit. "Dear heaven," I spat, and then covered my mouth with my palm. What is it? Another raven? A body?" "No body," I mumbled. My teeth chattered. Then what? I switched the call to video, foregoing my usual spruce up, and aimed the camera at the hole. A shovel rested nearby. The spade end was buried beneath a bush. Its post peeked out from beneath the dark leaves. "That's a shallow grave," he commented. TC's voice was as chilled as I felt. Of course, my rambunctious cat chose that precise moment to leap over the hedges. His yowling startled me. I screeched and spun. Tripping over the shovel's exposed handle, I fell, rear end first, into the awaiting final resting place. My phone skittered away from me. It landed at the toe of a grubby pair of boots, only 3 feet from me and the grave I was stuck inside. Chapter 8. A grimy hand reached down to me. "Penny? Penny!" TC's frantic voice hollered from my cell. Air shoved from my lungs. Even if I'd felt safe enough to call out to him, I couldn't. Sniffling rattled from the owner of the hand. I forced myself to look up. If this was death, I wanted to see it face to face. I had a few choice words to say to it and its feathery henchmen. I blinked up into Maddie's red-nosed and tear-stained face. Shock isn't a strong enough term for the feelings that shook my ribcage. I reached up and grabbed Maddie's hand. She clenched her fingers around my wrist and hoisted me up to the right side of the dirt. I scrambled to my cell and turned off the speakerphone. "I'm okay," I said to TC. "I'm here with Maddie," I added. Then I propped the phone up next to me with the camera facing Maddie. I was sure TC would remain silent unless something terrible happened. In case the worst-case scenario flared up, TC would have a video account of what had happened to me. Maddie's eyes widened when I dropped her name. She followed me as I placed the phone where it could see her, but said nothing. Maybe she, too, wanted a witness. I waited until we were both sitting on stable ground to look Maddie over. Dirt lined her face and was caked all over her jeans. Her hair was a mess of tangles and twigs. She shivered, but didn't seem to notice. She didn't try to warm herself by pulling her jacket tighter or rubbing her arms. Maddie sat with her knees curled up to her chest, staring at me. "What are you doing out here?" I asked the most obvious question first. The rest of the farm wasn't yet awake, or at least it seemed that way. Milking wasn't for another hour or so, yet Maddie was up, dressed, and hanging out in the bushes. I... Maddie's stammer was off-putting. "I wanted to get a jump start on this side of the farm. The goat's water froze." She burbled over from stuttering speaking to babbling in between bursts of tears. "I didn't mean to. He scared me. I didn't mean. And now he's. And I'm. And you're." I shook my head. "You're not making any sense." My phone chirped at me. I lifted it to my face, keeping one eye on the weeping Maddie. The battery light flashed at me. My all-night chat with TC had worn out the reserve. "TC," I said. "I heard it," he said. "Call me as soon as you can." "I will," I said. Shutting off my phone had never felt so foreboding. Something was very, very wrong on the goat farm. And now my lifeline to reality was out of charge. I shuddered. Maddie's eyes sparkled with fresh tears. My impulse was to hug her. The unmarked grave 12 inches to my left had me second-guessing my intuition. "What's with the giant hole?" I asked. Maddie crumbled in a heap of heaving tears. She fanned at her eyes and blew out exaggerated, slow breaths. Nothing she did seemed to steady her. I didn't want to turn my back on her or make a challenging situation worse, but something needed to change so we could move toward solutions. I stood and dusted off as best as I could. "You look like you could use something warm to drink," I said. "Do you want to wait here, or can I convince you to come back to the van?" Maddie sobbed aloud as small creatures fled into the underbrush. I guessed that Spades was chasing mice. I clucked for him and was shocked when he pranced up to me. I left Maddie to collect herself behind me. I knew our conversation was just beginning, but had no idea the curve it would take in the coming hours. "I'll run," I said, and I did. Spades hissed at me as my chin collided with his head as I sprinted and skidded across the lawn. I chucked him inside Godzilla, plugged in my phone, and flipped on my instant kettle. I paced just outside the van, waiting for the water to bubble. Never for longer than a minute did I take my eyes off the tuft of foliage that I knew hid Maddie and the pit. The main house lights flickered to life. Colleen's back door swung open, her radio blasted country music from the 90s. When she bellowed out the chorus, I cringed. Her singing wasn't bad, but the song grated. Achy Breaky Heart could be fun to belt out on a long stretch of highway, but it was a nuisance in the middle of dire circumstances. Still, it was better than the creepy theme song of the night before. I grabbed 2 cups of hot water and 2 envelopes of instant coffee. If Colleen spotted me at the van, she might call me over, and I needed to get to Maddie. I wanted her away from where the raven had last lingered. As I hustled back to my coworker, doing my utmost not to splatter myself with smoking hot water, I didn't look up until I reached the road. The raven, etched in the leaves of a bush, hit me like an emotional throat punch. I hurried all the more. Maddie was still in the same place I'd left her. I made up our coffee and handed her a cup. After a long swig, which I was certain skimmed off a few dozen taste buds, Maddie made eye contact. "Oh, Penny." Her wistful tone bordered on confessional. "I don't know what I'm going to do." "About what?" I said, more than a little worried about what her answer might be. "About him." Maddie gestured behind her. Him? My stomach dropped. I followed Maddie's motion over to a cluster of bushes. 2 feet in blue and red woolen socks stuck out of the green. I blinked. The feet did not go away. Chapter 9. "Don't freak out," Maddie said as she set down her cup of instant coffee and held her palms out between us. "Freaking out is the responsible response," I said. "What happened? How did he get here?" I wondered. In a flash, I surveyed the tiny clearing. "And what is that?" I pointed to the hole. "Were you going to bury him?" I questioned. My heart would not slow in its beating. My head spun. "Did you dig this? Who is he? Was he? What happened? We've got to call the police," I stated. I patted my pockets, but my phone was charging in the van. "If you slow down, I'll tell you everything," Maddie said. I paced, avoiding the grave. "Sit down," Maddie begged. "Please, I can't do this alone." A knot formed in my gut. Hadn't I thought the same thing many times? Maddie seemed sweet. Sweet people didn't kill other people, drag them into the bushes, and then plan to bury them. Sweet people called the police at the first hint of trouble. The smallest sip of hot coffee boiled the inside of my cheek. I coughed and sputtered it out all over my chin. "I don't understand," I said. "It's never happened like this before." As a rule, the raven gave me clues before a death, not as it was happening. I had time to find the victim and at least try to thwart destiny. There, in the woods, I sat face to face with a nameless victim and his supposed killer. Confusion needled the back of my neck. "What does that mean?" Maddie asked after my confused confession. "Do you often come across dead bodies and murderers?" With the last word, Maddie collapsed into tears again. Little did she know, death was a faithful companion of mine. This sudden visit alarmed me, but was not surprising. I muddled over her words. "So, you killed him?" Maddie nodded. She smeared tears and snot down the sleeve of her sweater. leaving an additional smudge of mud across her face. I didn't mean to. Who is he? I asked. Someone would come looking for the poor man. It would be best to turn him over to the authorities with a name to go with the find. Colleen's old boyfriend, Nigel Hannigan, Maddie sniffled. He was up at the big house last night after you went to bed. I heard them fighting, so I peeked out of the dairy shed. And? He went away hollering something. Colleen followed him. And then you killed him? Maddie shook her head. I couldn't imagine Maddie strangling a chicken, let alone killing a full-grown man. No! Her whispered shout was adamant. I double-locked the shed and went to bed. I rubbed circles between my eyebrows. I did not know what was happening. Had the raven marked this stranger? Or had he marked Maddie? Or both? Was Maddie next on his list? I'd have to keep her close, just in case. Then when did you know? This morning. Right before you came through the bushes. I shook my head. There's no way you dug this pit so quickly. It was already here, Maddie said. I fell into it when I dragged his body over here. Maddie kept acting as if everything she was telling me was as clear as crystal. Speaking in fragments, she left me with the hardest questions to ask. You didn't kill him in here? No, she sniffled again. Over by the goat waterer. I nodded, hoping it would prompt her to tell me the entire story. She complied after taking a small sip of her coffee. It had been a chilly night. I woke early, hoping Colleen would have the kitchen open already. Maddie frowned. Colleen just opened the back door, I added. When I stepped out and saw the frost, I remembered the water had been on the fritz. Its heater hasn't been working, so I grabbed my coat and hurried over here. Sure enough, the water had frozen over. I could picture the scene. Mustard and Plum's automatic waterer had an electric heater attached. It was why I parked beside them, so I could use the second plug to charge Godzilla. Without the heater, the water would ice over. I got the hammer and went to work, she continued. Maddie's shoulders shuddered. Don't fall apart, I said. Not yet. Maddie sucked in a breath and let it ooze out of her mouth with deliberate slowness. I was breaking up the ice, she continued, when this man came up to me and attacked me. I could feel my eyes widen in horror. Maddie nodded at my animated expression. Her lips trembled as she added, He grabbed my shoulders and was all over me, touching me and pulling me toward the bushes. Pulling you toward here? I asked, surveying the area. Had he intended to hurt Maddie and then chuck her in the hole? Terrified tingles coasted up and down my spine. Yes. And then what? Maddie took another long breath, followed by a much less anxious sip of coffee. She shivered. I chastised myself for not bringing her a blanket. Though at the time, I hadn't been confident she was a victim, and I was hurrying to stave off further raven attacks. I wrestled myself free from him at first. He snagged my ankles and dragged me back. That's when I swung at him, she recounted. She cast her eyes toward the bushes. With that. I followed her attention, and my gaze landed on the small hammer Colleen kept next to the goat waterer for mornings just like these. Oh, I stammered. I see. I'd forgotten it was in my hand. I just meant to smack him and then hurry to the big house. I didn't mean to kill him. Honestly. I wouldn't have judged her if she had meant to kill him. He was beyond wrong. Attacking a young woman was horrible enough. Digging a grave to ditch her inside afterwards was evil. Feeling much safer in the present company, I scooted closer to Maddie and wrapped an arm around her shoulder. She cried for a few moments. Then she looked at me, full of fear and worry. What should I do now? Was she looking to me for advice? I didn't know what to do. Well, I started, we do have this perfectly prepared grave here. Maddie eyed the hole. I don't think that's the wisest move, I said, concerned that Maddie was so desperate to recommend such a feat. You're sure he's dead? I asked. Maddie sniffled. No pulse. I frowned. The morning was frosty, but was it cold enough to keep the body fresh for a while longer? The more time we took to deliberate, the more and more guilty Maddie looked. Sure, she'd killed the guy. However, it was self-defense. I stood and took 2 brave steps closer to the sock-footed man. What happened to his shoes? I asked Maddie. He wasn't wearing any, she answered. I scanned the area around the hole. No shoes. From my standing position, I looked over the body. The man was lying face up. With his eyes closed, his expression was peaceful. The slight gash on his forehead hinted at something more traumatic than an ill-placed nap. There was nothing I could do for the dead man lying in the bushes. Maddie, on the other hand. Maddie needed my help. Perhaps it wasn't her immediate life that needed saving from the raven. Maybe it was her reputation and status as an innocent. I gave her a stern look. Her face was green and her lips pale. She would be sick if I didn't get her away from the man. Come on, I said. Let's go milk and get you cleaned up before breakfast. After a warm meal, we'll both think more clearly. Maddie nodded. It took her 3 attempts to get to her feet. She shook from hair to toe. I wrapped an arm under her and led her across the street to the goat barn. TC is never going to believe the mess the raven had dumped on me this time, I thought. I headed off to complete the morning chores and left the dead guy to his privacy until later. Chapter 10. Maddie and I milked in our normal rhythm. Apart from calling the goats by the wrong names, Maddie was in control of herself. She didn't cower or stammer. Getting her away from the fresh corpse did her a world of good. Her faculties returned. I proposed not to debate our next steps while milking. Frankly, I needed the mundane, repetitive motions to clear my mind. Everything in me suggested I call the police. The sooner, the better. However, I knew what it was like to be tossed under the bus. I didn't want to do that to Maddie. Giving her story the credit due to it, I believed her, and wait for her to calm before getting the authorities involved. She locked the last goat into the group pen and returned to me. Her eyes glazed over as her recent memories fought for the high ground. Now what? She asked. Let's get you cleaned up. The police won't like that, Maddie said. I frowned. You're probably right. Let's bag up your clothes. I want you refreshed and fed before we call the cops. I can't see Colleen letting you in the kitchen as soiled as you are at the moment. Without waiting for her reply, I led Maddie to the dairy shed. Her steps were heavy, causing her to lag unless I pulled her along. At the barn, I opened the door and let my friend inside. The shed wasn't much warmer than my van. With 2 huge refrigerators and a large freezer, Colleen didn't have to keep the temperature so low. However, milk products were literally her bread and butter. She risked nothing to fate. The bathroom was a small nook in the corner of the shed, consisting of a single shower stall, sink, and toilet. It wasn't pretty, but functional. Maddie and I shared the use of the bathroom and shower. If she were in the shed when I needed to shower, Maddie would pull closed a curtain used as a partition between the toilet and the makeshift bedroom. She'd stretch out on her cot as I hustled to get out of her hair. Now, I sat on the floor next to the bed. Maddie had bagged up her dirty clothes. I wasn't sure what good they would do the police. Perhaps the effort would make us appear less guilty. I wished I had my cell with me. Texting TC would help time fly and ease his anxiety. I could imagine how it would feel to be left hanging on after such a strange announcement.
My foot tapped as I waited for Maddie to complete her shower. If it were me, I would wash at least twice after such an incident, maybe even 3 times. Steam wafted from the shower into the bedroom cove. Then again, perhaps I would try to scald the scoundrel and his sliminess from my skin's memory. No doubt that's what Maddie was doing. When she entered her room, wrapped in a robe and a towel, her legs were pink from the heated water. "I'll leave you to get dressed," I said. Maddie nodded. Her wide eyes were rimmed with sadness. "Meet you at breakfast?" "Of course," I replied. I offered Maddie a smile before I hurried to my van. Colleen would ring the breakfast bell at any moment. I didn't want to make her upset by being tardy. I needed to let TC know that I was still kicking. If he'd ditched me as I'd done to him, I would claw at the roof tiles. I ran to Godzilla. Slipping and skidding, my muck boots carried me across the moist foliage. Relieved to not end up face first on the poo-covered ground, I slammed to a stop at the van door. Spades shot a look of disdain in my general direction. "Sorry, buddy," I said. "I can't stop to pet you," I added. I stretched out on the floor of the van and yanked the phone toward me by its cord. Spades pounced on it. Without a playful note, he screeched at me as he pawed at the phone and my hand. "Dude!" I snapped as one of his feline talons drew blood. "I know, but you're a cat. You're supposed to enjoy being left to your own devices." I pulled my cell to my face and hit redial. Spades rubbed up against my bum as I lounged in the doorframe to make my call. "What happened?" he asked. TC didn't procrastinate with formal greetings. "There's a lot to explain," I began, "and I don't have time to explain it. The short story is that Maddie may have killed Colleen's ex-boyfriend in self-defense." "Did she call the police?" I frowned. "Not yet," I said. "Maddie wants to talk to Colleen first." "Why? Won't she be ticked about her ex?" It was a valid question, yet I hadn't thought of it. "I don't think they liked each other much." "Then what was he doing trolling her goat farm and flirting with her employees?" Another excellent question. My heart warmed. Not only did I like TC, but his help was growing more and more priceless. With someone else to debrief and discuss with, things were much easier to navigate. Returning to the current situation, I said, "I think he did more than a little harmless flirting. Maddie was terrified." "That bad? How awful." The mournfulness in TC's voice, for a stranger's pain, made me like him even more. TC cared. His compassion wasn't a gimmick or an act. It was real and came from a deep, thriving part of his soul. He wasn't all production and flash. Even for his podcast, TC was genuine. The guy cared about his callers and those he helped. He cared vividly. "Yes," I said, smiling. I felt for Maddie and sided with TC's sorrow for her, but my heart couldn't help but flutter for the sweet friend on the other line. Guilt melted over my affection for the podcaster. I continued. "She says he grabbed her and kept making advances until she whacked him with a hammer." "A hammer?" "It was the only handy weapon," I explained. "She'd been de-icing the goat's drinking water." "Keep going," TC said. "What about the pit?" "She says it was there already, dug before her attack." Static rattled on TC's end. "Scrub's calling," he explained. "I've got to buzz him in." There was more I wanted to talk to TC about. For the moment, I was content with him knowing I was safe and that Maddie wasn't the villain she may have appeared to be during our last chat. "Okay," I said. "Colleen's about to call me in for breakfast anyway. She despises tardiness." "Gotcha," TC said. "Was there anything else you wanted to toss at me before we hang up?" Images from the last hour replayed in my mind. Yes, a song. Achy Breaky Heart." TC laughed. "That's an actual song?" "Yes," I answered. "Scrub will know it. Ask him." "I will," TC said, still snickering.
Anything else?
Yeah, I added. The guy wasn't wearing shoes. Maddie said she noticed that after she hit him. There were no shoes around the hole or by the body.
TC mulled it over. Scrub and I will figure something out.
Great, I sighed. Thanks. I love I can count on you guys. I hadn't meant to say that out loud. It wasn't a huge pronouncement, but it was more than I would typically say to anyone. TC released a sigh. I couldn't tell if he was exasperated with me or happy.
We're glad to help,
was all he said back. I was too flustered to say goodbye and swiped the call to an end. Why was I a complete goober when it came to interacting with other people? The greater my feelings were for that person, the worse my social skills became. I didn't need the Raven to sabotage relationships for me. I could do that on my own. That didn't mean he would stop attacking my friends and relations. As Colleen rang the bell for breakfast, I could feel his feathery presence looming just over my shoulder. What did he have planned next? I thought. Chapter 11. Maddie was already seated at Colleen's table when I walked in the door. She stared into her oatmeal and stirred it at random. I helped myself to the morning meal and popped a piece of whole wheat bread into the toaster. While I waited for it to launch back up, I slapped softened butter into my bowl, then sprinkled cinnamon and stevia on top. Coffee steamed in the pot beside the stove. I poured myself a cup and turned to offer Maddie one, noting Scarlett wasn't at her usual post. Colleen burst into the room before I could hand off the mug. "It's a great morning," Colleen whistled. She did a hobbling jig in the center of the kitchen. If her hip was healed, she might have line danced across the hardwood floor. Maddie whimpered. I set her cup down and returned to my toast and oatmeal. Taking the chair beside her, I patted her on the shoulder. She ignored my encouragement and continued to glare into her bowl. I watched Colleen shuffle step around the room as she retrieved her morning meal. It would not be as easy to break the news about her ex to her when she was so peppy. Over the weeks I'd been parked on her property, I never witnessed Colleen to be cheerful, let alone peppy. Scarlett clambered down the stairs. She wore blackout shades and a scarf. Her look was breakfast at Tiffany's meets Green Acres. It led me to wonder just how much drinking she and Colleen indulged in the night before. Maddie mentioned they'd cracked open a bottle of Fireball after dinner. I hadn't been around. I'd been talking to TC and Godzilla and waiting for the next milking session to begin. Scarlett wasn't as happy-go-lucky as Colleen. She lumbered toward the coffee but ignored her colossal thermos. Instead, Scarlett opted for a disposable cup with a lid. Leaving the creamer where it was, she swigged the coffee directly after pouring it. I'd never seen her drink coffee without adding a shovel full of sweetener. Something odd was going on. "Come on," Colleen chimed. "The one morning I feel alive and zesty with energy, everyone else is down in the dumps?" Colleen pulled out a chair and lowered herself onto her seat donut. A wince of discomfort flashed across her face, but didn't linger there. Her smile returned as she buttered a piece of toast and then drizzled honey on top of the pooling smear. "Doesn't anyone have anything to say?" she asked, scanning each of our faces for information or empathy. Maddie shoved away from the table. She bolted from the kitchen toward the dairy shed. "What's eating her?" Colleen asked. I shrugged and chewed into my toast. It wasn't my place to say. "And what is wrong with you?" Colleen asked. This time, her interrogation was directed at her friend. Scarlett snorted. "As if you don't know." She gulped more coffee before rubbing her temples. "I poured the drinks. I didn't make you drink them." Colleen laughed. "Eat something. You'll feel better once you have something in your gut to take the edge off." Scarlett snagged a slice of bread from the box and staggered to the table. She ate it without toasting or topping it. All the while, she hunched over and rested on her elbows. "If this was a hangover, I'd already be out with the goats." Colleen's smile flattened and reformed. "It's a good thing we're free of that man.
once and for all. Speak for yourself, Scarlett groused. I cringed. Could they be speaking about Colleen's ex-boyfriend? The same man Maddie had witnessed Colleen screeching at the night before? The exact person who was lying dead in the shrubs across the street. Nonchalance failed me. I coughed. Colleen stopped joking with Scarlett long enough to give me the once-over. Who pooped in your porridge? She asked. As if the imagery brought about by her question wasn't enough to kill my appetite. The answer to it sure did. I ignored Colleen and forced myself to eat another spoonful of oats instead. Old Nigel is lucky we finished making soap already. Perhaps he'd have gotten a face full of lie instead of a kick in the pants, Scarlett said. Colleen nudged her friend's shoulder. Really, Letty, she said, lowering her exuberance just a smidge. I don't get you. You should be happy for me. Glad that oaf is gone. Happy that I was strong enough to toss him to the curb. He's never coming back here. Never. Scarlett grimaced. She finished her bread and coffee before retreating to the counter. I swear I heard her whisper, more than you know, as she went to refill her mug. I would have to ask her about that comment later, without Colleen present. There was something suspicious about Scarlett's sudden avoidance of her friend's attention. On an average day, the two were close. Sometimes they argued, but their fights were more on the playful side of annoying. They ended in raucous laughter, not name-calling or throwing punches. How come Scarlett was acting so cold toward Colleen? And how come Colleen was so jubilant about something so distressing to Scarlett? Perhaps if I stayed quiet and acted oblivious, the two would discuss matters. Maybe they would forget I was present and dive deeper into the previous night. Colleen leaned back in her chair, watching Scarlett rumble about the kitchen. Swirling her coffee mug in one hand, she crunched her sticky toast, using the other. Nigel isn't coming back, Colleen said, her voice much less enthusiastic than the last time she spoke. I thought that's what you wanted. It isn't about what I wanted, Scarlett half-whispered. Nigel was a monster, an emotional murderer and assassin of all good things. Whoa, I thought. Assassin? I felt even worse about what Maddie had experienced as I listened to the friends describe the dead man. Yes, but he's good-looking. I noticed Colleen spoke of Nigel in the present tense. Scarlett used the past tense. What did Scarlett know Colleen didn't? And how did she know it? Maddie crept back into the kitchen and took her place beside me at the table. She rubbed at her eyes with the cuff of her sweater. Colleen? She started. Just a minute, Colleen huffed. She wasn't being rude. Her friend's strange behavior absorbed Colleen. If you're not hungover, then what's up with wearing those shades? Scarlett turned her back to the table. If not for Colleen's healing hip, I was sure she would have launched from her seat and ripped the sunglasses from her friend's face. Scarlett appeared to follow my thoughts. She raised a hand to the earpiece and held it there. Did you? Colleen's sharp intake of breath stunned us all. You did! I can't believe it! I can't believe it! All this time, all these years, you've begged me to ditch that man, and all so you can creep around behind my back and... Colleen shook. I felt myself lean farther away from her. That clunky cup of coffee of hers would make a fantastic projectile, and I wasn't sure her aim would be true given her building hostility. What? Scarlett spun around. How could you? She slammed her cup down on the countertop. The disposable cup wasn't sturdy enough to withstand the impact. Coffee splattered around the room. A droplet landed on my forehead. I'm going to pretend you didn't say that, Scarlett said. What else am I supposed to think? Friend. Colleen hissed the last word like it was the vilest of profanities. Scarlett trembled with her own rampaging emotions as she awaited Colleen's questioning. If I check my security feed, am I going to see you leaving to meet Nigel?
My Nigel? Scarlett's mouth dropped open. Yes, I thought. Yes, she most definitely was. Scarlett mopped the spilled coffee off the front of her shirt. She huffed. I am not playing these games with you. Colleen squinted. Oh, really? Really? Scarlett exclaimed and then left the kitchen through the back door. Her silhouette retreated to the goat pens. Maddie mumbled something to herself. I guessed she was about to start her confession. I grabbed her wrist and shook my head. Not now, I mouthed. Colleen was livid. Telling her anything could cause fireworks. I finished my oatmeal and downed the last swallow of my coffee. Come on, I told Maddie. Let's start our chores. Maddie's eyes were still glossy with regret and unshed tears. She opened her mouth to speak. I shushed her. To keep her safe from Colleen's wrath and unjust accusations, it was best to keep Maddie away from our boss and her friend. I didn't need to explain my motives to Maddie. She nodded and joined me as I left the kitchen and headed out to the goats. Chapter 12. Scarlett was not with the milking goats. I kept a keen eye out for her, hoping I could get more information about her night with Colleen and Nigel. She was nowhere to be found. Maddie trudged around behind me. She did little of the work, other than holding open a gate or two. She spent most of the morning sniffling. I did my best not to be annoyed. I couldn't think, with her heaviness following me around the field. Toward the end of our morning chores, a light flickered on in my brain. I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier, I moaned. What? Maddie responded more out of habit than concern. Colleen's security cameras. They'll back up your story. At first, a slight smile cracked on Maddie's forlorn face. It was swallowed up a second later by terror. What if she's already checked them? My stomach lurched. Colleen had threatened Scarlett with just such an action. I bet she's too busy fuming to have gotten around to the videos yet. No one wants to discover their boyfriend and their best friend were sneaking around. Even Colleen. I'm sure she's waiting for a confession from Scarlett. I wasn't at all sure of that fact. However, Colleen hadn't come storming out of her house to beat the fire out of Maddie. From the absence of police officers, I guessed she hadn't called the cops either. That meant Colleen still thought Nigel was alive, which further meant she didn't know Maddie had whacked him over the head with an ice hammer. For the moment, Maddie was safe. However, Maddie was right. We needed to hustle to Colleen's security feed, just in case our employer decided she was done waiting for her friend to do the honorable thing. We needed to get to it first. Maddie's confession would go a lot smoother with video to back up her shock. Bringing it to the police would save her from jail and keep her clear of Colleen's volatile wrath. I don't suppose you have any idea where Colleen keeps her security feed? I asked Maddie, whose eyes were stupefied at my hidden suggestion. Sure. But are you going to break into its history? It wasn't anything I hadn't tackled before. A few of my old employers were on the giving or receiving end of scams and schemes. I'd done my share of breaching security. Plus, I had a secret weapon. During my quick update to TC, Scrub had reported for duty at the podcasting studio. If I couldn't break in, I was positive Scrub could talk me through it. Leave it to me, I said. First, show me where the cameras are. Maddie locked up the last pen and led me around the farm. Colleen hadn't skimped on security. It gave me the creeps to see all the places she could have been spying on me and the others. There was even a camera pointed at my van. Technically, it was aimed at Mustard and Plum, but my van was a star attraction to the feed. I shivered. The thought of someone watching me gave me the willies. When TC and Scrub had asked me if I wanted to hire a private investigator to find Christy, I'd refused. If I couldn't stand to have a stranger stalk me, then I wasn't about to pay one to hunt my sister. If the three of us couldn't find Christy using my information and their skills, perhaps the universe didn't want me to find her. Maybe that was a good thing. I don't think I'd handle it well if I found my little sister just to allow the Raven to mark her. In fact,
That was one of my greatest fears. It replayed in nightmares and even daydreams if I let the thought take seed. It was a little easier to take being under surveillance when Colleen was trying to protect her animals. I wasn't the centerpiece of her spying. Her goat babies and their babies were her main concerns. Even the cameras on the front of her large home didn't point toward her door or windows. They focused outward and across the road. They were pointing at the other half of her property. The cameras on the front porch angled at the goat waterer. However, none were aimed at the woods just near it. Woods that I knew hid a cooling corpse. Okay, I told Maddie after she took me to the last of the cameras. Let's head inside to the monitor. Maddie shook her head. I don't think I can, she whimpered. Her skin paled. I don't think I can stand being around Colleen. Not now. I rested a hand on her shoulder. Self-defense is not the same thing as murder. I know that, Maddie said, mopping more tears from her face. You don't know Colleen and Nigel. People talk about their relationship throughout town. Passionate doesn't begin to explain it. If they were so in love, then why are they exes? I asked. Maddie leaned closer to me. I said passionate, not loving. There's a difference. On again, off again doesn't scratch the surface. They were either about to get married or about to murder one another, Maddie explained. She shot a shaky hand to her mouth at the mention of the M word. It was too late for her to take it back. The word seared into my thoughts. Could Colleen murder her ex? If we buried Nigel, would she be blamed for it later? I didn't like the thought of Maddie going through the ringer for self-defense. I also didn't like the idea of Colleen falsely accused of murdering the man. Maddie was insistent. I still think we should bury him in his own trap. I frowned. Let's see what the security feed says first, I said. Hope spurred me to calm Maddie enough for her to do the responsible thing and call the cops, or else I would have to do it myself. Maddie swallowed back her fear of Colleen and agreed. Okay, she sighed in reluctance. It's this way. Chapter 13. In a large closet beside Colleen's washer and dryer, there sat a desk decked out with security gear. More monitors than I believed necessary rested on the desktop. Each screen rotated between 3 to 6 camera views. I'll man the stairs, Maddie whispered. We passed Colleen on our journey to the second story. Our boss laid stretched out on her couch, a cooling gel mask draped over her eyes and a heating pad on her healing hip. Her fight with Scarlet zapped the energy from the loud woman. A snore rattled from her face as Maddie and I tiptoed up the staircase. She's still on the couch, Maddie informed me. Great, I said. I doubted Colleen could make it up the stairs without us noticing. Still, I would hate for her to catch Maddie and I snooping around. Unlike her aunt, Colleen was closed off and defensive. She would take our invasion badly, even if it was to help her. I returned my focus to the screens. One seemed dedicated to the 2 milking goat pastures and the back barn. Another one flashed the image of Godzilla across it once every 60 seconds. Each time the familiar van distracted my attention away from the other screens. The last screen captured images of the pasture land across the street. As I'd predicted, it caught the full front of the livestock pen. A tiny corner of shrubs flickered on the screen. It was enough to spot someone entering the woods, but not enough to determine what was going on inside it. I fiddled with the keyboard. A closer zoom caught the edge of the bushes with more clarity, but told me nothing. I removed the extreme close-up. Now, I whispered to myself, time to figure out how to rewind the footage. Maddie crept slowly back to me. Make sure you keep the surveillance rolling. We don't want Colleen to notice a gap in the times. I needed reinforcements. After a quick text to Scrub, I scrolled through the footage. Maddie kept flickering her attention between me and the stairway. She's still snoring, she reported. Scrub called. I answered before the phone could switch from vibrate to ring. Penny? He said brightly. We were just talking about you.
Really? I questioned. His tone didn't reveal if his conversation with TC had been pleasant or awful. Brushing my curiosity aside, I explained my situation. Show me the monitors, Scrub said. I flipped the call to video chat and pointed the camera at the screen. Can you see them? I whispered. Yes, Scrub replied in the same hushed fashion. He was great at picking up on my cues. Then again, I didn't normally dial him to chat. Trouble followed my calls. He answered them, prepared for whatever I was tossing his way. I shut off the video chat and returned the phone to my ear. Can you help? Don't you know me by now, kid? He joked. Of course I can help. In rushed whispers, Scrub detailed how to peruse the security videos without disrupting the present recordings. I followed his every instruction, and in just a few minutes, Maddie and I were watching videos from earlier that morning. There on the lawn stood Nigel and Scarlett. Nigel was gesturing wildly. Scarlett returned the animated irritation. At one point, Nigel reached out for Scarlett and planted a violent kiss on her lips. She reeled. Pulling away from him, she sprayed his trousers with the hose she kept by the front steps. Guessing from the formation of his lips, Nigel cursed at her. She rallied with foul language of her own. Then she reached up and struck him on the head with a garden shovel. Nigel staggered back before leaning away from the camera's focus. Scarlett rushed off in a flurry of nerves. Maddie sighed behind me. She hit him, she said. I watched her add up the situation. With a shovel. I nodded. Scrub, I whispered into my phone. Help me fast forward about an hour. You got it, he replied. Again, with patient instructions, Scrub walked me through the process, step by step. There on the screen was Maddie. Wearing her clothes from earlier, she skipped across the street and toward the goats. She reached through the fence and petted Peacock, the matriarch of the bunch. The goat scratched herself against the wire fencing before wandering back to the rest of the clan. Maddie then walked over to the water machine and inspected the heater. She fiddled with the switch a few times before unplugging it. Then she picked up the small hammer and began tapping on the top layer of ice forming on the water bowl. Behind her, a shadow formed. A raven followed the shape closer to the working girl. Maddie gasped behind my shoulder. I jumped. Do you see that too? I asked. Was the raven getting more brazen and appearing to more than just me? Yes, she said, her hands trembling. My heart leapt in my chest. That's Nigel. He's coming for me. I can't look, Maddie said as she covered her face with her hands and turned away from the monitor. I felt my shoulders slump. Good for her. Maddie couldn't see the raven. I didn't wish this curse on anyone. After getting over myself, I hyper-focused on the screen. Nigel approached Maddie. The timestamp showed 73 minutes had elapsed since his encounter with Scarlett. I wondered over the time gap. Had Scarlett knocked him so silly that he wasn't himself after over an hour? It was disheartening and alarming, watching him attack Maddie. His hands were all over her. Even in grayscale, I could tell that Nigel was livid. He cursed and rallied at Maddie. He tugged on her, pulled at her shirt, grabbed her by the wrist, and forced her into the wooded area. A few moments later, Maddie crawled out of the brush. Just as she stood to run, Nigel was back. He wrapped his arm around her waist and yanked her into the bushes. I cheered for Maddie and eagerly waited her escape, even though she stood right behind me. A long 5 minutes went past on the monitor. Maddie reappeared. Nigel's shadow loomed over her. But the man never made it into the frame. Maddie dragged herself on hands and knees closer to the goat waterer. Desperate, she dug in the dirt. She flung the hammer over her shoulder. It flew through the air and disappeared off screen. In the video's corner, Nigel staggered backward in his sock feet. There was no telling if the hammer landed a direct hit or not. Maddie crumbled to the ground, right in the middle of the road. She wept into her hands, and she pulled her sweater closed. I begged Maddie's past self to run and get help. I urged her to get far away from the rampaging man. She did the opposite, as I already knew she would. Tender-hearted to a fault and naive to boot, Maddie returned to the wooded area to check on the injured Nigel. No activity shook the branches and brambles. Not until I came lumbering across the street with spades at my heels. The attack was over. Nigel was dead, and Maddie sat paralyzed with guilt and fear. "Everything all right?" Scrub asked. "Not even close," I answered. "Thanks for your help. I'll check in soon." "I'll be here," Scrub said. "Tell TC I'm safe." "Will do," Scrub signed off in his usual fashion. I took a moment to reset the system. Thankfully, he'd already walked me through those steps. Just in case I was interrupted, he wanted me to hide the evidence. I rubbed the back of my neck. There was no way to tell if Maddie killed Nigel. Not for certain. I swung around in my chair, about to console her and convince her to call the police. A shift in the gray and white caught my attention. Someone was messing about in the woods, right by Nigel's dead body. Chapter 14. "Who is that?" Maddie leaned down to glance over my shoulder just as I pushed the chair back. Our foreheads collided. She ended up on her tail next to the stairs. I leaned against the wall for support, clutching my head. "Come on," I said through gritted teeth, "before they get away." I hustled down the steps. Maddie was hot on my heels. We charged through the front room, startling Colleen to wakefulness. She hollered after us. I didn't stop to answer or slow to explain. Someone else was poking around by Nigel's dead body. I crossed the street and almost charged over Scarlett. She was dusty and sweaty despite the frosty morning. "What are you?" Scarlett began. She then registered Maddie's presence and Colleen following yards behind us. "How did you know?" she asked. She put her gloved hands on her hips. "What have you done?" I asked. Scarlett raised her palms out toward me as if to block my approach. I went around her and straight to the woodsy patch. Somebody filled in the hole with fresh dirt, and 2 blueberry bushes decorated the gravesite. I blinked and shook my head. What was going on here? First came Maddie's attack. Then she thwarts her assailant. And next, Scarlett buries him? None of it made any sense. Maddie bumped into me as she entered the small clearing. She paced a circle around the plants before rushing to the bush that once hosted the dead body of Nigel Hannigan. She stared at Scarlett in disbelief. "I don't know what the fuss is about," Scarlett snarled. "I was moving some of our plants to a shadier spot." That had been what Scarlett had been doing all morning, not her chores. She was burying Nigel. Why do that, unless— "Did you kill him?" I asked. 2 witnesses flanked me. Their presence made me feel bolder and more confident. Scarlett's eyes flitted to Colleen and then back at me. "I don't know what you're talking about." So, she wanted to play things that way, did she? Perhaps Maddie hadn't killed Nigel. Maybe she'd just dazed him, and then Scarlett finished the job. Or perhaps— The image of Scarlett hitting Nigel on the noggin with a shovel played in my mind. It was the same shovel hidden in the bushes next to the body. Had she tried to kill him earlier and then dug this pit to toss him inside? Had Nigel escaped near death to be attacked by a helpless and confused Maddie later? Colleen pushed past us all, careful of her footing. She eyed the distressed blueberry bushes and then looked at her friend. "What have you done?" Scarlett's bottom lip trembled. "Come inside, and I'll tell you," she whispered. "Then we'll call the police." I sighed. Finally, someone was talking sense. Chapter 15. From the outside, I had the least to do with the Nigel business. So, as the other ladies assembled around the table, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee. I thought better with a warm mug in my mitts. Also, scalding hot coffee made a superb weapon if things in the room grew agitated. It had saved me before. Maddie hadn't stopped shaking since entering the kitchen, whereas Scarlett kept worrying her hands together. Colleen chewed on her bottom lip while shooting the stink eye at anyone who looked her way.
I don't know where to begin, Scarlett said. Colleen mumbled. She crossed her arms and then uncrossed them over and over. Scarlett rolled her shoulders. I'm just going to rip into it. Please do, Colleen said. Nigel and I had a thing, Scarlett admitted. I knew it, Colleen yelled. Not that kind of a thing, Scarlett added in haste. A long time ago, we had an accidental encounter. At least, I thought it was accidental at the time. Now I know better. How long ago? I asked. I hoped the question would take the vinegar out of Colleen's scowl. Years, Scarlett said. She flashed me a weak smile of gratitude. Long before you met him, Colleen. Colleen groused. I set fresh mugs of coffee down before each lady. Maddie buried her face in the steam. I was young and stupid. He was dapper and dangerous. Colleen's eyes twinkled. By the looks of things, she would have described Nigel the same way. And, she spat, shaking her momentary connection with Scarlett away. We lived together for a time, she revealed. Scarlett's chest heaved as she released the weight of her words. Before I learned, he was a con man. Was? Colleen said. Colleen caught on to the past tense tone. Was? She sat up straighter in her chair. Are you telling me he's under the blueberry bushes? Scarlett raised her hand to deflect Colleen's sudden anger. Hear me out, Scarlett said. He ditched me at 20. 5 years later, I came to Grayson County, and that's when I met you. We became best friends, she continued. Colleen wiped at her eyes. A decade flew by. Nigel became nothing but a painful memory until the Honeybee Festival. When I met him, Colleen whispered. Scarlett nodded. You were so smitten, she said. So in love. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I hoped he'd grow tired of you and leave you alone. I didn't expect you to stay together for so long. And you were jealous? I asked. Scarlett didn't seem like the envious type. Still, I couldn't fathom her watching her ex have a loud and lusty relationship with her best friend and remaining silent. Maybe. At first, she admitted. Until I remembered who he was and what he was like. Then I just wanted him to stay away from you. And me, she added. Scarlett looked into her friend's eyes. I swear, the first time you guys split up, I thought he was gone for good. If I'd known he was going to be in our lives for 10+ years, I would have said something much sooner. By then, I was in love, Colleen said. And it was too late, Scarlett added. The older women reached their hands out. They consoled each other for a moment. I was glad the fire had left the discussion. Things would not get any easier once Maddie started talking. Colleen sniffled and swatted away a tear. How does that bring us to the blueberry bushes? Maddie stiffened. She didn't wait for Scarlett to begin her tale, much to my disappointment. There was more to the story than Maddie or Scarlett knew. I could feel it. Maddie went to speak, and then the doorbell rang. I was relieved. No one moved to answer the door. I'll get it, I said. Off to the door I went. Could today get any more discombobulated? Chapter 16. Hello? I greeted the man on the other side of the screen door with as little rudeness as possible. He was interrupting a much-needed moment of concentration. Hi. The man stumbled over his greeting. I'm looking for Colleen. You can't be her. I'm not, I said. The man smiled at me. Was that a flirtatious glimmer in his eye? He pulled his phone from the inner pocket of his black leather jacket. Reading the screen, he checked the numbers marking the doorframe. It's the right address, he said. Yes, this is Colleen's place.
Can I ask who you might be? The crooked grin returned.
I'm Pierce, he said. I'm here looking for my boss, Nigel. He had business here yesterday. When he didn't show up for work this morning, I tried calling him. No answer. I thought since this was his only stop that he might be here.
Why would he be here? Colleen asked as she limped up to the door, wearing her no-nonsense expression. The man in black turned his stellar smile toward Colleen. Her resolve wilted before me. She was a sucker for any good-looking man. I stepped to the side and let her engage the stranger in small talk.
You must be Colleen, he said. I'm Pierce. I work for Nigel.
I know, she replied. I heard.
Well, then, you know he's missing?
Pierce asked. A grown man can't be declared missing for at least 24 hours. Or is it 72 hours? I can never remember. Pierce snickered.
Why would I declare him missing? I just need to speak with him about a very important account, and I can't reach him. He told me he was visiting your farm. Knowing your, history, I figured he stayed over. I don't mean to intrude. He'll be ticked if I let this client down and we lose the business.
Colleen sucked in her cheek. Take a seat on the porch swing, will you? I'll be out in a bit.
Certainly.
Pierce complied with a smile. Penny, dear, Colleen whispered. Keep the handsome man company. I cringed. Me? She winked. Give me a moment. I'll have the girls freshen up and we'll see what he needs before continuing our talk. All right, I mumbled. If that's what you want. I desired few things less than to entertain Pierce. Still, Colleen had her reasons. The sooner the entire ordeal was behind us, the better. If sitting on a porch swing with a handsome guy in a leather jacket would speed things along, then I'd do it. I unlocked the screen and opened it without inviting the stranger inside. With an outstretched hand, I motioned to the swing. The curtain on one of the front windows moved. For a moment, I thought I saw the flutter of a black wing. My fears stilled when Maddie's bewildered face pressed against the glass. I offered a low finger wave to my coworker. Pierce took the place on the swing set closest to the front door. That meant I had to walk past him to take my seat. Nonchalance was not a skill set I possessed. Whenever I aimed for subtlety, I came across brash or boorish. My time on the porch with Pierce was no exception. I tripped. He lunged forward and caught me by the bicep. I was thankful I hadn't face-planted against the hardwood. Yet I didn't like the feeling of Pierce's touch. It made me nervous. Given the events of the morning, I couldn't think of anything that wouldn't have made me skittish. Thanks, I said without making eye contact. Blushing embarrassed me, which made me blush even more. The vicious cycle would end with either a hyperventilation spell or a bout of mechanical laughter. If I let the moment grow, I wouldn't get to choose which stress relief method my body opted for, and I wouldn't be able to control it once I was in the middle of a spell. I kept my eyes averted as I took my place on the swing. You work with Mr. Nigel? I said. Pierce's right eyebrow arched. He snickered.
Yes,
he answered my stupid question with a sprinkling of sarcasm.
For the last 2 years,
he added. 2 years, I repeated. I'd never worked anywhere for longer than 2 months, let alone 2 years. What's it like to work for him? Again, Pierce snickered.
Well, you've met him, haven't you?
I shook my head. Technically speaking, I'd never met Nigel. Not while he was still breathing, anyway.
Some might say you're lucky that way,
he remarked. His expression said it all. Nigel was just as unpleasant as the ladies described him. Then why stick with him for 2 years? Pierce rubbed the back of his neck and stared at me.
Usually, I'm the one asking the questions.
Sorry, I said. I'm too nosy for my own good. Ignore me. A dismissive hand wave later, Pierce added,
No problem. So am I. To answer your question, working with Nigel looks great on my resume. He introduces me to better clients. I do the boring work and I build my reputation while working for him. Once I'm better established, I'll branch off and start my own thing.
As a con man? I felt my face pucker and tried to hide it with a fake cough. Nigel's assistant would be on his own much faster than he anticipated. I didn't want to be there when he found out. My eyes drifted out toward the spot I'd last seen the dead man. I brought them back to the porch. I didn't want to give anything away. If Pierce noticed my lapse in attention, he said nothing. He began whistling a familiar tune as he started swinging.
I love porch swings, he stated. I never remember how much I like them until I need to sit on one. Hanging out with a cute chick on the swing makes me like them more.
It took me a moment to realize this stranger had just referred to me as a cute chick. Or maybe he was talking in generalities? Whatever the case, my mind was far from him. Just then, my eyes fell upon the obstacles that had caused my tripping spell a moment before. Nigel's shoes. Chapter 17. The screen door screeched as Colleen came out front. She noticed my pointed staring at the loafers on her porch. Depending on how well Pierce knew his boss, he was sure to catch the brazen clue only 4 feet from him. Colleen winked at me, wearing a long hippie skirt and homemade peach sweater. She sashayed past the shoes. I heard them thunk into the bushes just beneath the porch railing as she kicked them off the deck. The sound hadn't caused even a flicker to flash across Pierce's face. He turned his dreamy emerald eyes up to Colleen's scrubbed and made-up face. She looked lovely, but nowhere near young enough to flirt with the man. Though I wouldn't judge her if she did. He was attractive, and even if he was a con man like his boss, a little harmless bantering and batting of one's lashes wasn't a crime, unless you were using your wiles to cover up a murder. Had Scarlett and Maddie spilled the beans while I'd been swinging with Pierce? A stone thudded under my sternum. "Why don't you go help the ladies wrap the soaps?" Colleen commanded. I was free. With a curt farewell, I left Pierce and hustled my tail into the house. I don't know what I had been expecting, but I was perplexed to find Maddie and Scarlett wrapping bars of soap when I swung into the kitchen. Using square scraps of flannel, they blanketed each bar and tied them with twine. "Come and help," Scarlett said. Her face wasn't any calmer than when Pierce knocked on the door. Something strange was going on. I decided being blunt was the best approach. No one was seething or sobbing, so I asked, "What are we doing?" Scarlett changed her tone to a sing-song pitch. "We're wrapping the soaps. We do it each month after the bars have cured. The new batch is in the dairy shed. This one is ready to fill orders." "I can see that," I said as I took a seat. Maddie tapped a stack of purple and mint fabric. "These are for the lavender oatmeal soap," Maddie said. She repeated the gesture on a pile of gray and orange fabric. "These are for the charcoal. You wrap them, tie them, and seal the twine with a Tuft and Tails logo sticker." "Got it," I said. I wrapped 3 black bars of soap before asking, "Why are we doing this now?" Scarlett answered in the same strange, jovial manner. "We always wrap soaps the day after making a fresh batch. That, and we don't want that man hearing anything that might be taken the wrong way." Such as, "Uh-oh, we killed your boss," I thought. I kept my hands busy, which was great for clearing my mind. I wished I could get away to call TC. If I did, I could run everything past him. Until then, I worked what I knew backward. Maddie tossed a hammer and hit Nigel, killing him. At least, that was her opinion of what had happened. Nigel had brought that on himself by attacking her. From the security feed, I couldn't see anyone blaming her for anything other than self-defense. Nigel's repeated physical advances were spooky. Wicked was a better adjective. Then there was Scarlett. Nigel was her ex too. Sure, he was a far distant ex, but an ex nonetheless. From her tone, she despised the man.
It appeared to make her very skin crawl that he had the hots for Colleen. She had a spat with him an hour before his assault on Maddie. Plus, she'd returned to the wooded area and wasn't stunned or struck aghast by the sight of Nigel's corpse. No, instead of calling the police, she buried him. Then, to cover up the crimes, she planted bushes on top of Nigel's last resting place. It was all kinds of strange. What needled at me most were Nigel's shoes sitting in peaceful possessiveness on the porch deck. Why were they there? If Colleen had expelled the creep from her life, then why were his loafers lounging on her property? Shouldn't they have been on his body when he'd attacked Maddie? A pre-dug grave, an attempted assault, and 2 mocking loafers. Add to that 3 very shady women, and I had to consider the possibility that they were all prime suspects of a pre-planned crime. My palms sweated, releasing the clean scent of goat milk soap as I wrapped another bar. What was I going to do? Chapter 18. Colleen waltzed into the kitchen after the ladies and I had completed half the bars. She was humming the same tune that Pierce was whistling on the porch. If the raven hadn't already struck, I would have worked harder to figure out what the song was. Then again, it hadn't been 24 hours since my last sighting. Mr. Hannigan was dead. As far as I could tell, he was the only intended victim. I was given just one hint at discovering the hows and whys of his demise prior to his death. But there was also the achy-breaky heart clue. Did that point to anything regarding Nigel, or was it intended for someone else? Scarlett dropped her last wrapped bar into the basket and sighed. She leaned back in her chair and rubbed her temples. "I thought he'd never leave," she said. "What did he want?" "He said Nigel left a big job uncompleted. Pierce needs more information to finish the work. He also dropped off some of Nigel's personal effects," Colleen explained. She opened the fridge and took out a large jug of sweet tea. It was a bit cold for iced drinks. Then again, my throat was going dry from stress. I watched Colleen pour herself a cupful with envy as I chugged down a slug of my old coffee. "So?" Scarlett asked. "I told him that Nigel had come by for a visit and that I didn't expect him to return," Colleen said. "He wouldn't leave until I took a shaving bag for Nigel, should he drop by." "That's weird," I pointed out. "Pierce doesn't know you, even if Nigel does, or did. Still, he shouldn't be dropping off his boss's personal items with a stranger." Colleen said, "Nigel has me listed as his emergency contact, so I saw nothing odd about it." I disagreed. Driving out to a goat farm in the middle of nowhere to drop off a shaving kit was beyond weird. "Did he even ask where you thought Nigel might have gone?" "He didn't have to," she answered. "I already told him what I knew." She started humming again. This time, Scarlett joined in. "I love that song," she said. It bothered me that no one else seemed suspicious about Pierce's well-timed visit. "Yes, total eclipse of the heart is worth the entire 7 minutes," Colleen said and smiled at her friend. I was chomping away on my cheek. Wasn't anyone other than me going to start up the uncomfortable conversation that had to happen? It didn't seem like it. Maddie wasn't weepy anymore. Her eyes darted from side to side at every squeak and creak. It looked like her moment of clarity hadn't come. She was running from the impending pressure. "Scarlett, what were you saying before Pierce knocked?" Colleen lowered herself in the empty chair. Her smile deflated. "Yes, Scarlett," she said. "I'm sorry you got interrupted." "Nigel and I had words this morning," she said, summing up the fight Maddie and I had watched on the security feed. "He just wouldn't leave you alone." "Me?" Colleen grinned. "I can take care of myself." Scarlett shook her head. "You're always saying that. It doesn't make it true."
she commented. She leaned on her elbows.
You didn't know him like I did. He's vicious and mean. He doesn't stop until he's bled a mark dry.
Colleen bristled at the accusation of being a mark. If she hadn't been so offended, she might have noticed Scarlett's sudden heaviness. You were his mark? I asked her. Relief flooded her expression.
Yes.
Not Colleen?
And Colleen, Scarlett added. He used her as a backup, thus the on-again, off-again. He probably loved her as much as he loved anyone. Just not enough to save her from himself. This time he was begging for help. Nigel said someone was after him. Another lie, I'm sure.
What about you? I asked.
Me? I was a victim too. He had evidence linking me to our past marks, and he threatened to hurt Colleen if I said anything.
Physically? Scarlett nodded and shrugged all at once.
Yes, he wasn't beyond physical abuse. It didn't always end there. Money, reputation, trust. Whatever damage he could do, he did.
Colleen sucked in a breath. And then, this morning?
I had it out with him. And I hit him. Hard.
Scarlett didn't shake as she spoke.
He went down after the second swing.
You hit him twice? Colleen asked.
I tried to, Scarlett added. He hit me first, she divulged.
She shed her shades, revealing 2 swelling eyes.
I kicked him off me and he went down. I thought he was dead. So I came back later and buried him.
Just like that, part of the terrible truth was sitting with us at the table. All eyes fell on Colleen's face as we waited for her reaction. Maddie patted my hand. It was time for her to add her bit. Or so I thought, until Colleen started crying. Chapter 19. Colleen swabbed at her face and downed the rest of her sweet tea before she talked.
It's my fault,
she choked.
When I told you he wasn't going to bother us anymore, it wasn't because I kicked him out of our lives. It was because he was dumping me. Once and for all. He showed me surveillance videos of him with other women. He said they'd been sent to him by a private detective. He thought I'd planted the guy on him. I guess the detective let some unsavory characters to Nigel's door. He demanded I fix things for him.
I couldn't piece it all together. Scarlett believed she killed Nigel. If the video feed could be believed, Maddie had delivered the final blow. Now, Colleen was taking the blame? I couldn't help but ask her, how'd his shoes wind up on the front deck if he'd left you? She sobbed again.
Nigel stayed for one last night. In fact, he didn't tell me he was leaving me until this morning. It was still dark outside. He and I were on the porch, waiting for the sun to come up, when reality dropped. I was so hurt, I told him to leave.
Without his shoes? Colleen winked through her sorrow as she remembered her last happy moments with Nigel.
With only a blanket on, she said. I saw red. Flames could have radiated from my face. I was so angry. I stood up and shoved him over the railing. He laid there for a moment, stunned. I ran inside and tossed his clothes at him. But I kept his precious Italian loafers. He was in love with his expensive shoes. Later, I felt guilty and left them out on the stoop for him.
I added up 3 head injuries. From what I could remember of Nigel's countenance, there was only one obvious wound. As I calculated the time in my head, I found myself getting very nervous. No matter who was responsible for his death, I was in the presence of 3 would-be killers. Some had more justifiable reasons than others. Still, each had acted out in violence. I struggled to remain as easygoing as possible. Everyone at the table, other than myself, had reasons for killing Nigel. Each hadn't intended their victim to die. All had acted from passion, either to protect themselves or someone they cared about. There was no apparent malicious intent between the three ladies, although all three were relieved that the terrible Nigel was gone in an eternal sense. Maddie croaked and grabbed my hand. "I have something to tell you both," she sniffed. "Let's show them," I recommended. Having lived through their own traumas, it may have been easy for the older ladies to shrug off Maddie's experience. I watched it. Even with the screen between us, Maddie's terror was palpable. It had made shivers and sweat race up my neck and pool in my palms. There was no way, after watching Maddie's experience, that Colleen and Scarlett could refuse to call the police. Other than burying the body, Maddie had been the last one of them to touch Nigel. Her reason, at least in a court of law, was the most excusable. The video said it all. She hadn't enticed Nigel to the goat waterer with a master plan to murder him. Maddie was a victim, albeit a strong one that survived a vicious attack. Even the coldest of the social workers in my past would have sided with her, especially when they had video documentation to back it up. I was sure the surveillance would set everything to rights. The day would end with more tears and red and blue lights in the driveway. However, no one would be hauled to jail, and no one other than the actual villain would suffer. For once, the Raven had chosen a worthy victim. If anyone deserved his menacing presence, which I doubted, still, I wouldn't be weeping in my pillow over the death of his choice. Not this time. "Show us?" Colleen asked. Oops, I thought. I'd let my mouth go before my brain could catch up. "Earlier, I broke into your security feed," I admitted. The older woman tossed the hairy eyeball my way. "I wanted to help Maddie, and I didn't know what else to do. We didn't erase anything. I just backed up the feed and watched Maddie's encounter with Nigel." "It's that bad?" Scarlett asked. "Worse than our stories?" Maddie snorted and covered her face with a swatch of fabric. "I'll show you," I volunteered, scooting my chair back. Colleen and Scarlett exchanged a haggard and heavy look. If I could read their minds, I was sure they thought that the day couldn't get any more screwed up. If they felt that, they would have been wrong. I was up the stairs before anyone else. Maddie was second on the landing. Colleen rode up the incline in her stairlift, and Scarlett stayed a step behind the mechanical aid. I could get the cabinet opened and the computers to where I wanted them before Colleen tapped me on the shoulder. She needed the seat. "How did you get into my feed?" she asked, an eyebrow arch aimed at my uninvited inquisitiveness. "It's better that you don't know," Scarlett said. "If this helps us, then what does it matter?" "I guess," Colleen said. The look on her face wasn't convinced I was trustworthy. I could feel my upcoming paycheck shrink as my time at the farm was cut short. I wouldn't blame her. I'd broken into her security as she napped on the couch. Still, my motives were pure. In my experience, motives were judged by the survivors. If my digging freed Maddie but condemned Scarlett, I would be marked as a traitor and cast out. Still, if it helped Maddie, I didn't mind. She wasn't used to being a pariah. I was. "Play it," Colleen demanded. I leaned across her and hit the button. Maddie walked over to me and rested her head on my shoulder. Somehow, throughout the last few hours, I'd become her protector and confidant. Me, the girl death liked to pick on. I put a hand on her back, unsure what to do next. Did she need a hug? I offered a soft squeeze, and she fell apart crying. Soon the hardened scarlet wrapped both of us in a mama bear embrace.
"I'm so sorry," she whispered into Maddie's brown hair. "If I'd have known," she said.
Colleen gasped and sniffled as the story unfolded on screen. From the side of my eye, I could see her shoulders tighten and her fists clench. The man she thought she'd been in love with for years was a monster who preyed on anyone who crossed his path. Maddie pulled away first. She wiped at her eyes, keeping her back to the screen. It was still too much for her to watch and relive.
"He wasn't making any sense," she added.
"What do you mean?" Colleen asked.
"At first," Maddie started, "he came up asking me for help."
"Help?" I asked. That was news to me.
"Yes, but he didn't make any sense. He couldn't find his car and he was looking for someone. When I couldn't help him, he attacked me. He kept calling me Coco and dragging me into the bushes."
Colleen spun in her chair. Her eyes brimmed with angry and confused tears. "Coco?" Maddie nodded.
"That was his nickname for me. Was he looking for me?"
Maddie shrugged.
"I don't know," she replied.
Her tears started a full-force assault on her composure.
"He didn't give me a minute to find out. He began pulling at my clothes as he dragged me toward the trees."
Colleen sighed. "Well," she said after a long digestive pause, "there's one thing left to do." I almost hooted with joy. Once the police showed up and sorted everything out, this entire mess could fade away. I was glad. With a resoluteness that I didn't see coming, Colleen arose from her chair and stated, "It's time to take me to the body." "What?" I murmured as the wind shoved itself from my lungs. Chapter 20. Scarlet stood in front of the bushes, staring downward. She retold the story of her time with the beloved betrayer. Colleen held her hand in sisterhood. An even deeper bond formed before my eyes. If they hadn't lived like blood relatives, they would from that day out. Maddie leaned on my arm. She shuddered to be back where the gloomy morning had started. I couldn't imagine standing over Nigel's homemade grave was a comfortable place for her to be. As far as any of us knew, Maddie had killed him. Sure, the other women had landed blows and helped Nigel's death along. My guess was he'd been knocked silly from his battle with Colleen and then Scarlet. If Scarlet had decided digging a hole for his body was a logical step to take, then I could assume after her encounter with him, he'd looked dead as a doornail. What other reason would she have for risking it all to bury the man? She could have revived him and sent him packing. Instead, she returned with the farm's best shovel and hit the soil. Later, after Maddie's interaction with Nigel, Scarlet had come back and finished the job. She hadn't been shocked to see him dead or surprised he wasn't where she'd left him. That thought gave me the heebie-jeebies. She'd left him there for dead and went about her day. Colleen swayed as she offered a last few tears for the love of her life that wasn't. "Come on back to the kitchen," she said. "I'll break out a frozen pie and we'll figure out what to do next." "What kind of pie?" Maddie asked. I shook my head. Who were these people? "Coconut cream," Colleen said. "I was saving it for Easter, but today is a new beginning too. Let's dig in." A flush rushed across Colleen's face. She giggled. "Poor choice of words," she said before leading the way to her house. I was the last to leave the area, appalled by the lack of urgency in the group. Still, after Scarlet called back for me, I, too, trekked back into the kitchen. It was 1 p.m. The fog had lifted, and Nigel was tucked in the cold earth. The more time ticked past, the harder his position would be to explain. I was about to argue my side of the story when Colleen slammed the frozen pie onto the counter, startling us all. Dang it, she expressed. We can't just leave him out there, even if he was a two-faced scoundrel. Scarlet frowned.
I guess I could dig him up,
she said. Maddie shivered. With the video and Maddie's confession, things should go much more smoothly. That was easy for her to say. She'd spent the morning believing she alone had ended the despicable life of Nigel Hannigan. Any other story but hers would lift her weighted worries. Maddie agreed. I know we all played a part in a way. That makes it easier to take somehow, and my story will play out better than either of yours. I knew Maddie was sacrificing her momentary peace to do what was right. I was proud of her. It couldn't have been an easy path to take. I waited for Colleen and Scarlett to support Maddie's honesty. Of course, when Maddie told her story, they would help her out by telling their stories. I waited for them to offer their backup. They didn't. Instead, they sent invisible messages to each other across the kitchen. We can't just leave him buried beneath blueberry bushes, I reminded them. I'd had the misfortune of going toe-to-toe with murderers before. Recently, in fact. These three were more than a little unsettling. Their apathetic approach to the entire situation frightened me. She's right, Scarlett added, even as reluctance weighed down her words. Remember what he said about being followed? Colleen's eyes went wide. Yes, but the people he owed money to wouldn't come here to look for it. I run a goat farm, not a casino. Besides, living this far out of town, I won't be easy to locate. Colleen brought a pie knife to the table. It didn't matter that the coconut cream was a solid brick of promising dessert. She was pushing ahead with her plans to celebrate. His assistant knew enough to come here to drop off an overnight kit. I think professional criminals would have no issue finding you, I said. Okay, Colleen sighed. We'll dig him up. Maddie poked at the creamy border of the frozen pie with a fork. I rubbed my hands together, waiting for the next step of the plan to unravel. I'll go grab another shovel, I said. I wanted an excuse to get away from the insanity and stress. I needed to call TC and ask him what to do. Was it my civic duty to call it in? Or should I keep giving the parties involved time to make the best choice? Burying and then unburying Nigel would not bode well in any investigation, no matter their reasoning behind it. I had to get them to see facts. But how? Chapter 21. I dialed TC on my way to Godzilla. He answered after the first ring. Penny, he said to someone else. I figured he was telling Scrub that it was me on the line. After which I heard TC's assistant and friend holler, You safe, kid? Yes, I answered through TC, who no doubt was just going to ask me the same question. I'm safe. Any more clues? He asked. No, just the body in the woods. Now it's buried beneath the woods, I said, still shocked by the rash actions of my employer and coworkers. How did it get buried? Scrub asked from the background. Same way you'd think. Someone shoved him in a hole and put a pile of dirt on top of him. That someone was Scarlett. Scarlett? TC asked. What did she have to do with Nigel? He asked. TC's question led me to a lengthy discussion about the last few hours. I could hear pen hitting paper as TC took notes on the situation. That makes him the Raven's mark, he summed up. I suppose it does. His death wasn't as simple as it seemed. You think that mess seems simple? TC laughed. Scrub commented on TC's question. I couldn't make out his statement, whatever it was. It led TC to ask me, Any more songs or clues? Total Eclipse of the Heart? I said. That's the only other song I've heard all day. Scarlett was humming it, and then Colleen sang it. That's it. Strange, TC said. Do you feel like it's a clue? It's not anything that can help Nigel now. He's been on the wrong side of the dirt going on 2 hours. So, when are they calling the police? TC asked, what I'd been asking all morning.
I'm not sure, I said. They're debating what to do. Now that Scarlet buried him, it adds an extra element of suspicion to the situation. TC clicked his pen against his glasses temple. I'd seen him do it in multiple video chats, and I knew the sound. It was a habit that signified he was moments away from a breakthrough of some sort. While he thought, I unlocked my van and climbed inside. The stench of Spade's kitty litter box outweighed the male goat smell. I'm so sorry, Spades, I said. TC didn't comment on my random chat with my cat. He was used to my weird ways, as I was getting used to his. Pinching the phone between my ear and shoulder as I carted the box outside, I set it by the driver's side door so I wouldn't step in it when I exited the van. Since Spades had done his business inside the van, my cat wasn't in any hurry to leave the cozy feel of the passenger seat. He watched me take out his waste with one eye closed. I lit a half-used cone of vanilla-scented incense before shutting the door tight. TC and Scrub were discussing among themselves when I snuggled into my couch. I wasn't sure how long the ladies would wait for me before heading over to the wooded patch. I hoped it was long enough to come to their senses and call the cops. However, I doubted it. TC started the conversation about the clues a moment after I took my place on the couch/bed. We've outlined several of Hitchcock's well-known classics. We also watched a few episodes of his show. There's no chance he was whacked on the head with a frozen leg of lamb? It's a goat farm, I said. I knew what he meant, but couldn't help my sarcasm. No, I know the weapons used. A shovel, a spade, and a hammer. 3 different knocks to the noggin, the final one being the hammer. What about mismanaging anyone's career? Scrub added. I guessed he was making a playful dig at Billy Ray Cyrus, singer of Achy Breaky Heart. Actually, I began. A noise outside the van startled me. It wasn't abnormal for me to hear things when there was nothing to hear. A side effect of running from the Raven was an overdeveloped paranoid streak. Mine was so big, it was more of a character trait than an odd occurrence. Hang on, I whispered. I crept as best as one could in a tiny house and peeped out the window. Nothing out of the ordinary glanced back at me. I rushed to return to the safety of my couch. I thought I heard something, I explained. I wish they'd call the cops. This whole thing is making me suspicious of everyone around me. I rubbed at the tension building behind my eyes. A headache would slow my thinking. I needed to remain sharp if I was going to get out of this without becoming an accessory to murder. Or worse, the next victim. I hated that thought. I smudged it out of my mind like a gambler snuffed out his last cigarette. It was gone, but the idea of it wafted around me like smoke. Back to what I was saying, I said. Nigel wasn't just a lousy boyfriend. He was a con man. He and Scarlett started working together decades ago before he ditched her. When he popped back up into her life as her best friend's beau, she didn't know what to do. I have a feeling the animosity there was much greater than Scarlett let on. I bet he blackmailed her regularly. Or the other way around, TC added. We'll look into him. Do you know any of his aliases? Any chance Scarlett let a previous handle drop? No such luck, I replied. Then I remembered the man in black. A guy who works for him showed up today. Coincidence? Scrub asked. His question caught me off guard. Was it? I thought. Now that you mention it, his reason for being here was less than stellar. What was it? TC asked. He brought a shaving kit for Nigel to use on his trip, I told him. I felt my brow furrow, just as I was certain TC's had done. That seems a little outside the duties of an assistant, TC remarked. Scrub chuckled. I pictured him rolling his eyes at TC. And you never asked me to do anything outside the regular duties of a normal assistant? You have a point, TC said with a bit less confidence. This guy, Pierce,
He didn't seem like an assistant. Then again, he wasn't like you two either. He was more casual than I can explain. Too curious, too forward. Like Nigel didn't ask him to bring the kid. Pierce just took it upon himself to do so.
I guess that's nice, TC said, hanging on to the last word a little longer than it made sense if the sentiment was genuine.
It's creepy, Scrub said. I snapped. Exactly. It was the word I'd been searching for. Pierce was charming. However, his actions, and the reasons he gave for them, were out of place and overreaching.
Have you looked in the bag yet?
TC asked. How had he known I wanted to dig into the random shave kit? I had arranged a quick moment alone with the bag. Unzipping it hadn't been the riveting experience I'd hoped for. Just your basic toiletries, I told TC.
No expensive cologne or personal items, contact lenses or denture cream?
That was an odd question, I thought. No, I answered. Then TC's stream of thought dawned on me. You're saying it was too basic?
You tell me, TC said.
It had been less than intriguing. If all it held was convenience store sundries, then why the urgency to get it to Nigel? He questioned. Scrub's question sped through my mind. Because Pierce had another reason for being here. Like spying on or stalking Colleen or Scarlett.
It's an option,
TC added. Speaking of your fellow goat farmers, what do they think you're doing right now? Scrub asked. I checked the time on my phone. They think I'm taking a long time to get a shovel. I've got to go, I said, already reaching for the handle to my car door.
A shovel?
TC asked.
I'm afraid to ask, but for what?
To dig up Nigel. What else? Chapter 22. I hurried from the van to the shed nearest the milking barn. Grabbing a shovel, I rushed to the wooded area. The sun had broken free of the clouds, and little slices of light cut through the gray afternoon. On an average day, I would have stopped to appreciate their beauty. However, today was anything but average. I charged toward the gravesite, causing sweat to bundle beneath my jackets. The shady nook where Mr. Hannigan was buried would bring a bit of relief from the heat, but wouldn't hide the fact that I'd been running. To my surprise, no one was at the Blueberry burial ground. I stood there, alone, leaning on my shovel. Wasn't anyone in a hurry to dig this man up and hand him over to the authorities? I didn't understand their fear, but I hadn't been involved with his death either. Not if you discounted the raven. The distracting image of the cloud-like bird hovered in my memory. I'd been living the day as if I was an innocent bystander. However, the raven knew better. The day I rolled up to the Tuft and Tails farm, I had blessed the land with a death wish. It didn't matter if I pulled the trigger, or, in this case, swung the hammer. I was at fault because of my strange gifting that resulted in curses for those who encountered me. I was still ruminating on that humbling thought when a shuffling distracted me. The ladies entered the brush wearing farm coveralls. Smart, I thought. I probably should have changed as well. I didn't want a single strand of Nigel's DNA on my person. However, I was already smothered in the markings. I had tripped over him and then hugged Maddie after the two had tangled. I was doomed either way.
Let's get this over with,
Scarlett said as she smacked her palms together, getting herself ready for the work ahead. She armed herself with the shovel and sliced into the dirt. Careful of the bushes, Colleen commanded. Maddie, go get a few crates to hold them. Maddie hurried off to do as she was told. I watched as Scarlett heaved 3 loads of dirt off to the side before Maddie returned. When she came back, Colleen stole 1 crate and upended it. She used it as a makeshift stool and stretched out her healing hip. It had to be barking at her. The other bins were left to Maddie and me.
Scoop out some dirt, fill the bases, and then move the plants. Make sure you're protecting the roots.
Colleen continued to order us about as we kneeled on the dirt and scraped the bushes free. With each plunge into the soil, shivers bounced down my back. I hoped Scarlett had buried Nigel deep in the ground. I was horrified by the thought of reaching down for roots and brushing up against the dead guy's skin. Maddie seemed to feel the same way as she shuddered with each handful of dirt. She freed her bush before I could get to the roots of mine. Hoisting it out of the ground with an extra bit of oomph, Maddie chucked it into the prepared crate. Then she stood shaking next to the disturbed plant. A few minutes after the first bush was evacuated to safety, mine came free. With 2 hands, I carried it over to the crate and set it down. An orange shape caught my attention. At the bottom of the container, half buried, was a small medicine bottle. I resisted the urge to reach down for it before remembering this crime scene couldn't be more disturbed if it tried. I didn't want the ladies to see me. I still wasn't confident they were going to do the right thing. Any misplaced clue might send them 2 steps back and get Nigel reburied. I wanted to keep the momentum continuing in a forward motion. Waiting until all eyes were on the pit, I reached down with my sweater sleeve and picked up the bottle. Slipping it in my pocket while trying to keep my fingerprints off it was simple. Doing it in one easygoing and discreet fashion was harder. Once done, I hurried over to the grave. Scarlett handed me her shovel and passed Maddie the one I'd brought over. I had intended to do none of the digging. After all, I hadn't put Nigel there. Off in the distance, a crow cackled, reminding me not to be judgmental. The raven put the man there, and the raven followed me. I scooped up my first full spade of dirt. I wasn't about to dig deep. Slow and steady, I continued to uncover half a shovel of earth at a time. Cutting a chunk out of the dead man would help no one, especially if I got sick all over his corpse. "Stop!" Scarlett hollered after less than an hour. "We're over halfway there." I had measured the pit based on how deeply I could stand inside of it. I'd been in this grave before. That time, it was no deeper than my armpits. At that moment, I was up to my belly button in the pit. Scarlett offered Maddie a hand up. Together, they pulled me up. I dusted myself off in a frenzy as if I'd been covered in black widows. I smacked and swept as much of the graveyard dirt from me as possible. No one else acted as though they minded we were messing about with a tomb of topsoil. Then again, they had more to lose at this point than I did. "Now," Colleen said, "we have to dig with our hands." My spine shimmied despite the inner demands to remain unaffected. "Our hands?" Maddie asked. Colleen surveyed her dusty crew of grave robbers. "Perhaps you're right. That's a bit on the morbid side of things, isn't it?" Maddie nodded. Colleen turned to me. "Penny, go into the house and grab some plastic cups." Plastic cups would not act as that protective barrier between the living and the dead. Still, they were better than using our hands. "How about some gloves?" Scarlett suggested. "Great idea," Colleen said. "There's a basket of gloves above the dairy freezer in the shed." "I'll get them," Maddie said. We hustled off to do our chores. I ran, literally. If I could get Maddie alone for just a second, maybe I could get her to tell me what Colleen had planned. I charged through the kitchen, snagging the cups on the way out. Trying to race off the back porch steps and pivot toward the dairy shed had me skidding in the damp grass. I landed on my stomach on the ground. Colleen's pet goats, being playful pygmies, saw my crumbled form as another hill to conquer. They took turns climbing up my back and bleating at their dominance. Once my breath returned, I shooed them off of me and crawled toward the barn. Sergeant, the pet guard dog, rounded up the goats before they could start butting me. As fast as I could, I unfolded and continued my rush to the shed. Maddie was placing the basket back on top of the freezer when I opened the door. "Do you need to use the restroom?" she asked. I shook my head and caught my breath. "I just wanted to talk." "Okay," she said. Let's walk a bit slower than needed back to Colleen.
Sounds great, I said. Maddie handed me 2 pairs of gloves and then locked up the shed.
What do you want to talk about? She asked.
What do you think? I snarled. Then, remembering myself, I reeled the snark back in. What are Colleen and Scarlett thinking? What are their plans once we exhume Mr. Hannigan? Maddie offered me a half shrug.
Call the cops, I guess. It won't be easy, but I'll tell my story, and then we'll let the police take it from there.
Great. I was relieved. I didn't want to do anything shady.
You'll be there, right? She asked. When I have to tell the cops?
Of course, I said. She gave me a grateful yet sleepy smile.
I just want this whole day over with.
I wondered if Maddie would continue to work at the farm or if she'd go home early. I wouldn't hang out around the site of an attempted assault if I could help it. Then again, I didn't have anywhere else to go. Have you called your mom yet? I asked. Maddie bit her lip.
I'm scared, she admitted.
Scared? Why? My lack of family left me out of the loop regarding that social group's emotional dynamics. I assumed that when a person had a family, they bragged on and loved as Maddie did. There was nothing that could tear them apart. If that was the truth, then what was there to be afraid of?
Disappointing them, Maddie said. Also, I don't want to be seen as weak. I fought hard to get them to trust me and prove myself to them. This job was part of that. I don't want them to worry about me and baby me, even if I am the youngest. I think knowing I'd been attacked would send them reeling.
I frowned as I thought over her words. You defended yourself.
Yes, and then I panicked. I should have called the cops, as you said. I should have run for help. Instead, I freaked out.
I agreed with her. Still, Maddie had done her best. Colleen and Scarlett were complicating matters. I didn't say it out loud. It would worry Maddie all the more. She had enough on her plate. Seeing the dirt-covered and still dead form of Nigel Hannigan promised to be traumatic enough. I'd be there as best I could be, but I was no replacement for family. She should call her parents. From her description, they would understand and help her with the troubles lying in wait. Chapter 23. I needn't have bothered rushing to get to Maddie when the 2 of us stepped through the hedges. What we saw shocked me.
Where are they?
Maddie asked. Crates, shovels, and a half-up-dug pit sat in silence. They told a story. But what was the next chapter? I stepped back and examined the area. Drag marks from the pit leading to the road were fresh evidence. They've taken him back to the house, I said.
Why?
I hadn't the foggiest. Swelling with curiosity, I strode across the road. Maddie shuffled behind me. The day was growing from freaky to ridiculous. Opening the door for Maddie, I walked in without knocking. When I turned to lock the screen, I noticed 2 disturbing changes in the farm. First, the downstairs bathroom echoed with the sound of a tub filling up. Second, across the street and deep in the goat paddock, the man in black was watching Colleen's place. Had he seen Scarlett and Colleen drag Nigel back to her home? If so, he didn't seem disturbed by their actions. I squinted to get a better look at him. He held a silver object in his hand. My breath caught when I deduced it wasn't his cell phone. It was a camera with a long-range lens. He had it pointed right at me. Crab apples! I swore in my weird fashion. Dad had taught me and Christy when we were tiny. Curse words were the mark of an unread person. He'd loved books, so then and there I'd vowed never to use profanity if I could help it. However, if ever a time called for a good round of swearing, it was now.
I pulled the curtains closed, hoping that it would deter anyone else from spying. There was enough for me to deal with already. Adding a stalker or a nosy coworker into the mix would not work for me. Chapter 24. The sound of water splashing turned my mind back to what was happening around me. I barged down the hall to see for myself. Maddie got there before me. Her dark eyes simmered with doubt and fear. She munched on her nails with worry. I cringed. I knew where her hands had been. I reached out and lowered her hand. They're washing him, aren't they? I asked, praying I was wrong. Maddie nodded. I nudged her out of the way. Don't watch, I said. She turned and placed her back against the wall. I stepped into the bathroom, wondering when I'd become the stable one of the group. What are you doing? I asked, for what felt like the 1,000th time that day. We can't have the cops wondering why Nigel is covered in soil, Colleen explained from her perch on the toilet. How lucky it was for her that her hip was still healing. That meant Scarlett did the bulk of the corpse, dragging, dropping, washing, and drying off. Why not? I asked. If they were planning to tell the police the whole story and show them the video, then what did it matter? An honest, panicked bungling of the crime scene would be better than a mad scramble to erase the evidence. I didn't figure there was any use expecting a reasonable answer to my question. These two best friends had lost their marbles. At least for the time being. My thoughts flashed to the man in black across the road. Had he seen Scarlett drag his lifeless employer into the house? What would he say when Nigel's body appeared fresh and clean? That reminds me, Scarlett said. His clothes are in the wash. Can you fetch them in about 7 minutes? I set the washer to rapid wash. I'm guessing they'll be ready for the dryer by that time. I couldn't believe the ease with which Scarlett lifted a stiff limb of her ex and scrubbed it down with a bar of charcoal soap. She even scrubbed his nails with a brush. I turned my back when she got to more private areas. It was not my dream of dreams to be anywhere near a naked corpse. Although being an undertaker would have been a wise choice for me, given the Raven's love of sprinkling my life with victims, I might have to give that some serious thought, I thought. When I exited the bathroom to switch the laundry, Maddie was slumped on the floor. It's almost over, I said. Colleen caught my paws and hollered out from the bathroom. Don't worry, Maddie. It's all going to work out for the best, I promise. I gave Maddie's shoulder a soft squeeze on my way to the laundry area. Using gloves, I switched Nigel's damp clothes to the dryer and turned it on. I was in too deep now. If they all went down, I would too. I'd made enough dumb decisions in the last 18 hours to be considered an accessory. While upstairs, I snuck another look at the security monitors. The man in black was gone from the spot I'd last seen him. Chills prickled my scalp. I sank into the desk chair and played with the keys, zooming in and out all around the farm. I found the man, by the milking barn. What are you doing there? I asked quietly and from a safe distance. I watched as he went into the barn to exit a moment later. Was he looking for Nigel? I had to tell Colleen. I slid down the banister and swung around into the hall. My breath was gone when I entered the bathroom. By then, the ladies had finished washing Nigel. They had him propped up and were blow-drying his hair. The smell of the heat mingling with soap and the body had me turning green. I stepped out of the room and took a deep, clean breath before re-entering. Pierce is poking around the farm, I told Colleen. She didn't bother to ask what I'd been doing snooping at the cameras. I was glad she hadn't picked up on that bit. She swore in a whisper. That changes everything. She sighed and her face flushed. Scarlett shut off the hairdryer. What are we going to do? Colleen nibbled her lip. We will not panic. We all know Nigel's death was an act of self-defense. The act of an honorable young lady trying to defend herself.
No one is to blame but Nigel. Even if he had been smacked silly by us in the first place? Scarlett asked what I was too nervous to ask.
Heck yes,
Colleen rallied. Besides, we looked him over. There was only one wound to the head, nothing else. Nothing that wouldn't back up Maddie's story and the video. I exhaled through pursed lips. That was great news. Sure, cleaning Nigel up was weird, but the truth was finally going to be known. Except, Colleen continued, my nerves rumbled in expectation. Now that Pierce is here and looking around, he might have seen too much. We're just going to improvise a little. Oh no, I thought. Colleen picked up on my aggravation. She sent me to the kitchen to check on Maddie. Also, she said as I was leaving, get the grooming kit and the shoes. We want him all put together for the show. The show? I asked. When the police arrive, we don't want them to need to investigate anything other than what we've told them, Colleen added. Our story should be plenty to dismiss the accident, especially if we have all of Nigel's possessions in one place. It didn't make sense to me. Nothing that day had. I went to find Maddie, hoping she would make it through the rest of the day without cracking. The ladies in the bathroom had lived over half their lives already. One random mystery death would be an exciting memory to share at the rest home in 10 years. Maddie was closer to my age. She was optimistic and kind. I wanted her to stay that way as much as possible. Putting today into the hands of the authorities would help her on her way back to normal. But not if Thing 1 and Thing 2 kept fouling up the simplest of tasks in their need to control everything. My stomach swirled as the hairdryer shut off, and I overheard the ladies discussing styling options. Chapter 25. In the kitchen, Maddie was picking at the iceberg of a coconut cream pie. She didn't eat a single bite. Instead, she chiseled off a piece, stuck it on a plate, and continued to stab at it in small, controlled movements. It was obvious her brain was replaying the past and creating worst-case scenarios for her to choose from. Her shoulders were tense and pinched at her neck. Her forehead was lined with worry wrinkles. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. Out of the 3 mugs I'd already served myself, I had yet to complete one. That explained my raging headache and fatigue. Adrenaline was wearing off. With a warm mug giving me vibes of normalcy, I sat at the table across from Maddie. They sent me to check on you, I said. How are you managing? I'm terrified, Maddie answered, without lifting her gaze from the mutilated pie. Funny, isn't it? What? While I was being attacked, I thought that would be the scariest part of my day. I cried out for God to help me. I begged to get away from the man. Once he was dead, a whole new fear washed over me. One that wouldn't let me think or even react well. I took a long, slow sip of my coffee. Listening was my specialty. I leaned in, hoping to show Maddie I was interested and ready to hear whatever she needed to say. She jabbed at a piece of the crust before starting back up. Now, with all that haphazard choices I've made, I'm afraid I'm the one stuck in a pit and not Nigel, she muttered. She set down her fork and made eye contact with me. I know Colleen and Scarlett are trying to help, she sighed. They are also trying to cover their tails. I don't blame them. They have good hearts. They're just a little too paranoid to be practical. That's a great description, I said. I hoped Maddie was right about the ladies' characters. Not knowing them for as long as Maddie had, I saw them as suspects instead of sweet ladies. If Maddie was right, maybe their mother Henning explained their madness. They had flipped from cold and distant to involved and empathetic at rapid speed. Perhaps the women I knew before.
the same ones who gobbled all the good toast and downed all the coffee, wore walls I couldn't see. Maybe urgency and trauma brought out their softer sides. A girl could hope. I finished my coffee before heading back upstairs to the dryer. Again, I was careful to wear gloves when taking out Nigel's freshly laundered clothes. Deep down, I knew it didn't matter. My DNA and prints would be all over his shoes and shave kit. I took my bundle to the downstairs bathroom and handed it over. I found this in the hole. I'm not sure if it's his or yours. I didn't have time to read it. I added. I handed Scarlett the medicine bottle. Now that the ladies were thinking a bit more clearly, I decided I wanted all Nigel's effects away from my person. That's his medication, Colleen said. Nigel was on medication? For what? Scarlett asked. He wouldn't tell me, Colleen added. What's new? It sounds like the man hid over half his life from me. Not anymore, Scarlett said. She scanned the bottle and read out the name of the drug. This is for heart conditions. That's what I call a cruel irony, Colleen said. The ladies fell into silent contemplation for a moment. I dropped Nigel's loafers just outside the bathroom door and hightailed it back to the kitchen. I didn't want to be within earshot for Scarlett to ask me to help dress him. I peeked into the kitchen. Maddie was still taking the day out on her defrosting plate of dessert. I checked in with TC and Scrub while I checked the security monitors. What news? TC asked. I explained the strange happenings on the bottom floor. We also have his dedicated employee roaming the farm. With dusk creeping up on us, I'm worried that guy will be in the barn when it comes time to milk again. That's a couple of hours away, Scrub explained. How's Maddie? Shaken, I said. I turned on the monitors and followed their progress around the farm. Do you see him? TC asked. Nah, I answered. That means nothing. He could be inside a barn or someplace. Did he drive up to the farm? TC's question gave me pause. No, I said, surprised I hadn't noticed that before. He didn't. And I didn't see a driver drop him either. That's how Nigel got here. He took a local cab out to the farm. I remembered the worse-for-wear town car as I'd watched it bumble down the dirt road. I'd been letting Spades out for a bathroom break and spotted it in the distance. It had meant nothing to me at the time. Colleen's wasn't the only destination on the road, just one of the farthest from town. Then how did he get there? Scrub asked. That's an excellent question, I said. My hand was already scrolling the mouse. I explained to the boys what I was doing. I'm scrolling for a vehicle somewhere. Maybe I can't see him, but I may see where he parked. Yes, TC said. Scrub hummed something in the background while they waited to hear from me. The barns were empty of any biped activity. The nanny goats were meandering closer to the barns. They felt the end of the day coming as well. Godzilla looked undisturbed. I groaned when I zoomed in closer to my van. What is it? TC asked. Nothing major. I left Spade's litter box outside. I'll have to let him out in a bit, I said. However, I couldn't do that if the man in black was still around. Pierce, or whatever he called himself, had given me a weird vibe from the very beginning. I continued surveying the farm. Then, at the back edge of the livestock yard, I spotted it. So small, in grainy black and white, I almost missed it. A motorcycle was parked right outside the back paddock, near where Pierce had been watching me with his camera. I wondered why I hadn't seen it there before. Maybe I'd been too focused on the eyes watching me? Or perhaps he'd moved it. I knew he was still around, which did nothing to calm my nerves. As long as I could see his bike, I knew it wasn't safe to head outdoors. I'd have to tell Scarlett and Colleen that Pierce wasn't in a hurry to depart Tuft and Tails. Chapter 26.
Why is it so hard to do the right thing? Scarlett growled under her breath. Nigel was lying on Colleen's living room couch. He was dressed down to his shoes. Maddie had suggested putting sunglasses on him to be a little more respectful, but Colleen had objected. He's leaving with just what he brought with him, she'd said a bit defiantly. Bitterness had taken root and would remain in Colleen's heart until the body was gone for good. What did you do with his pill bottle? I asked. It's in his shirt pocket, Scarlett said. Colleen stamped her foot and winced in pain. Scarlett frowned at her friend. Poor thing, she said. After I bleach out the tub, you need a long soak in Epsom salts. You haven't been taking care of that hip. Colleen nodded. Once this is all over, I'm taking a pain pill with a shot of Fireball. Then I plan to sleep until I can't anymore. Everyone in the room could benefit from a long sleep. Things like that were luxuries on a working farm. I doubted Maddie or I would get to enjoy such an extravagance. That was, if we stayed on after the business with Mr. Hannigan was completed. I guessed Maddie would go straight home after giving her statements to the police. I was glad for her. She needed her family now more than ever. Hopeful expectation plummeted from the room once I announced Pierce was still lingering about the farm. Where is that punk? Colleen asked as she lowered her stiff hip into a recliner. I can't tell, I answered. I've been watching his motorcycle. I'm going out there, Scarlett said. The room went silent as all eyes, except Nigel's, stared at her. It's still Colleen's farm. It's my place of work and he's messing with my goats. What are you going to say if he confronts you? Maddie asked. I'll tell him to hit the road, she answered. I rubbed the back of my neck. What if he's not Nigel's employee? What if he works for the guys who are after Nigel? Colleen's flash of fear was palpable. She tried to hide it after the first second. It was no use. Even as she waved a dismissive hand at us, she didn't return to her relaxed confidence. There's no reason for anyone to want to come here, except to get Nigel himself. Now that he's not a draw, we won't be messed with. No one knows he's dead but us, I said. Pierce may believe he's hiding out on your farm. That could be why he's here. All the more reason to put Nigel back where he fell and get the police out here, Colleen said. Put him back? I asked. Hadn't we done enough to the man? Yes, she said, as if it was the most straightforward solution. We're putting him back out by the hedges, about the same spot he attacked Maddie, near the mailbox. That's not where things happened in the video, I argued. I don't see that it matters much, Colleen said. Maddie's story doesn't change. It sunk in. Scarlett and Colleen both looked guilty on the video. Even though I hadn't seen Colleen shove Nigel from her porch, Scarlett's attack was vivid. They couldn't hand over Maddie's video without exposing themselves to trouble as well. What if they don't believe her? I asked. Maddie whined to herself. I'm sorry, Maddie. I don't think that will happen, but you've got to have the video as backup. Maddie looked into the faces of the women she'd declared as kind-hearted. She read the same thing I did in them. Sure, they wanted to protect Maddie. No one questioned that. But they also wanted to protect themselves. I rubbed my forehead. Maybe Scrub could help me figure out a way to save Maddie's part without keeping Scarlett's. I was about to suggest it when Colleen interrupted my train of thought. You see, Colleen said, even if we just keep Maddie's scene, the timestamp could condemn us all. Her attack happened over 7 hours ago. There's no way the police are going to buy our story now that we've waited so long. It's what I'd been saying the entire day. We're keeping the video, just in case, Scarlett said. How? I asked. We're hoping you could help us with that,
Colleen winked at me, hoping I'd conspire willingly. Chapter 27. After almost an hour of watching the screen, Pierce returned to his bike and drove away. Maddie and I watched him go. What had kept him so long at the farm was still a mystery. "Now then," Colleen said, "let's get Nigel back where he belongs." The goats were waiting for their nighttime milking. Colleen never allowed Maddie and me to neglect the goats for even a moment longer than necessary. Death must have been the one exception to her rule because her four-legged babies seemed to slip her mind. Scarlett and Maddie carried Nigel's body back toward the wooded area. Using a blanket as a gurney, they did their best to keep him off the ground. Colleen staggered behind them. She used her lopsided gait to smear any drag marks the duo might make. As they positioned the body, I was given the job of filling in the pit. "Don't forget to replant the blueberries," Scarlett reminded me. "Got it," I said. I was less than thrilled to be back above the grave. It was better than dealing with the body. For that, I was happy. I still didn't like how the situation was being handled. It would be my word against theirs. I'd refused to erase any footage for the simple reason that I wasn't sure how to do it. Colleen decided she'd let the stream tape over itself. I didn't argue. Her security feeds stayed alive for a designated amount of time, then looped over the earlier recording. Somewhere, Colleen had instructions or a contract of sorts that detailed that information. I wasn't about to suggest trying to find it, as that would just lead to more delays. Plus, I'd be the one forced to implement her plan, and I wanted nothing to do with it. Maddie needed to be allowed to tell her story. She deserved to be heard and understood. The attack and retaliation she'd been forced to undergo wasn't the sort that drifted out of one's memory. It lingered, festered, and waited for the worst likely moments to strike. If Maddie wanted the mature freedom she'd expressed to me she did, she would need to overcome this entire ordeal. Stepping around it or leaving it for later promised to do more damage. I thought all this over as I heaved dirt back onto the ground. It was laborious. Somehow I managed it with speed and vigor. I credited my last job for my sudden stamina and strength. It had been at a gym. However, wrangling and milking goats day in and day out hadn't hurt my physical abilities either. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive. My body echoed that sentiment. Somewhere in the last few weeks, I'd given life a second chance. I wasn't hiding in the shadows or lurking just outside of the normal. I was enjoying my days. Sure, I still had to be careful. Attachments led to raven attacks. I didn't see that changing soon. That meant my jobs would remain menial and low in status. Instead of viewing myself as a refugee, I'd started seeing myself as more of a wanderer, living on purpose on the fringe of normal. It wasn't glamorous. It was a life, and I was feeling a weird contentment with it. Now that TC and Scrub were helping me look for Christy, I thought about my friends from afar. I hadn't wanted them to become friends, more for their safety than for mine. There was a new feeling brewing between the three of us. Something more than professional. Something a teeny bit different. As long as they stayed safe, I was glad for it. Of course, thinking about Christy and the podcast as I shoveled led me to dwell longer on the thoughts of TC. That tangled weave of feeling needed sorting out. Perhaps once I got away from danger for a moment, and maybe once we found Christy, I could take a short pause from the chaos to delve into my feelings for the man. There was an edge to our friendship. It had been there the moment we'd met, at least on my end of things. I couldn't assume he felt anything other than professionalism and slight employer protectiveness toward me. His voice lilted a little too low, and his eyes sparkled behind his spectacles when he talked with me. Scrub's teasing also had me wondering if the tiny static buzz felt when we chatted was felt by TC too. All my daydreaming had the pit filled in record time. I'd even planted the first blueberry bush back into the ground. While I lowered the second into a small hole, I was startled back to the gruesome present by loud cursing and the screeching of brakes. Chapter 28. I ditched the plants and hurried out of the woods. Once the sunlight hit my face, I rethought my gut reaction. I should have paused to deliberate with all that had been going on before charging out toward the drama. What I saw almost made me throw up. Curry, the mailman, stood before his Jeep apologizing without end. With one hand, he gestured to the ground and back to his Jeep. His other hand held his phone. He alternated between talking to Colleen and into his phone. "I didn't see him," he repeated. Colleen's surprised face masked her frustration. "Curry, I'm going to say it again. When the sun sets over the farm, it's a wonder we don't have more accidents. No one can see a thing. Your boss needs to allow you to start your day out here instead of making you save the back roads for last." Curry ignored Colleen's statement and turned his attention back to the phone. "Yes, you heard me right," he said. "I've hit a man. Yes, Tufts and Tails Farm. Colleen is here with me now. No one else is hurt." "The man?" Curry's voice cracked a bit. "The man appears to be dead." Colleen butted into Curry's conversation. "I don't think you killed him," she said. "We noticed him out here with Maddie and came to see what was going on." Curry was half listening. He continued to report his side of events. After calling her parents, Maddie sat on the ground with her back against the fence. Her favorite goat, Peacock, walked up behind her. The goat's bell alerted her presence, but Maddie stayed hugging her knees to her chest. This time, her weeping wasn't accompanied by volume. Her tears ran in silence down her cheeks. I went to her. "If you don't scoot forward, Peacock will start chomping on your hair," I said. I put a protective arm behind her head and shooed the goat away. Maddie stared speechlessly at the wreck. The mail jeep was bent around the mailbox. Nigel was sprawled out on the other side of it. Scarlett kneeled beside the body. She uttered silent words to the heavens as she pretended to take his pulse. The cat wasn't just out of the bag. It was tearing down the tapestries. We waited, out by the road, for the police to show up. Neither of us were willing to leave the scene, and all of us were scared to the point of paralysis. After the initial comments and calls had been made, Colleen kept repeating her tale as if to remind all the players of their parts. "Scarlett and I were in the kitchen. We heard a strange cry and ran out to the porch. That's when we spotted Nigel attacking poor Maddie. Of course, with the sun in our eyes, we couldn't tell it was Nigel. Maddie did her best to fight him off. She got away only to have him grab her again. Scarlett helped me down the steps, and we were about to hurry to the rescue. That's when you came up, Curry. You were like an angel. I don't know if he was on the ground before you hit him or not. It's hazy. I'm thankful Maddie escaped. Look at her. She's a mess. She doesn't even realize what's happening. I can't believe Nigel attacked that sweet girl. You really can't know anyone, can you? Why, just the other day..." I tuned her out at the part where she rambled about how deceived she'd been by Nigel. She went into vivid detail about their fight earlier that morning and how disgusted she was that he took his rejection out on Maddie. Every time I caught a few seconds of phrasing, I blanched. Twisting of the truth wasn't something I took lightly. I sat beside Maddie until her parents arrived. They drove up minutes after the ambulance and the police. Creating a dust twister, they pulled into the grass in front of Godzilla. Maddie's mother was out of the car before the brake settled. Her father wasn't far behind. They both scooped Maddie up from the dirt and wrapped her in an unwavering embrace. I couldn't help but smile. Maddie was where she needed to be all day. The couple offered me a polite small wave as they escorted their daughter onto the front porch and away from the carnage. Police swarmed the scene. They placed Nigel on a proper gurney after pictures were taken and details were jotted down. One officer pulled me aside for questioning. I'd lived the routine too many times to count. "Why are you covered in dirt?" she asked. Her badge had the name Williams engraved on it. I stared at it as it glinted in the fading sunlight as she asked her questions. "I work here," was my answer. "Do you get that dirty working on a goat farm?" Williams asked. "Sure do," I said. "Check your shoes before you get back in your cruiser. You'll see what I mean." Williams frowned, then continued her questions. "Did you know Nigel Hannigan?" "The dead guy?" I asked. Williams nodded. "I'd never met him," I said. I didn't add "while he was alive" to the statement. She didn't ask. She went on questioning about the events, asking me where I had been and what I had seen. I recounted my morning experience with Maddie for the most part. I left out the details of time and the open grave I'd fallen inside. "You said she hit him with a hammer?" Williams asked. "No one else said that." Oops, I thought. What I said was, "That was her story when I found her. Maddie was a mess." "Understandable," Williams added. "She said the man attacked her. She fought him off. She thought she may have hit him with a hammer," I described. Williams looked me over. "Why did she have a hammer to begin with?" I laughed. "Goat farm stuff," I answered before explaining about the watering system and its tendency to freeze over. Williams shook her head with every explanation of goat farm life. If she were shocked by my answers, she didn't act it. She took notes and surveyed the scene around us. "Well, Penny," she began. Here came the wrap-up. "Stick around for a few days. The town doctor will give Mr. Hannigan a thorough look-over, though his initial observations led him to believe Nigel had a heart attack. He even had an empty pill bottle in his pocket. If your friend hit him, it didn't do enough damage to kill him. I'll call Colleen with any details we find. I'll give you a ring when you're cleared to leave town," she told me. My breath must have ceased because she added, "Don't worry. We're just covering all our bases. Plus, Curry over there will have his hands full explaining to his boss the accident, though it doesn't look like the Jeep made contact with the man." "Interesting," she said. If Williams had expected me to comment, she walked away disappointed. I let out a huge breath of relief when all lights and sirens receded down the road, carrying Mr. Hannigan along with them. Maddie gave me a small wave as she loaded into the back seat of her parents' car. She wasn't coming back to the farm soon, which meant all the milking was up to me. I didn't mind. I could use the time to think. Scarlett and Colleen invited me to dinner once my chore was done. Even though my stomach rumbled, I didn't think I could bear being back in that kitchen. Not yet. They seemed relieved when I declined. They had matters to talk over themselves. Thankfully, Scarlett plated up huge portions of dinner in an insulated bag for me. I showered off caked-on dirt and decay before picking up the food on my way back to Godzilla. It had been a day. Before entering my van, I went to retrieve Spade's litter box. There, in the scented sand, was the toe print of a cowboy boot. I told myself it was nothing, though that nothing looked a lot like evidence Pierce was searching for his boss in my bus. Ignoring my gut, I left the box out for the night and allowed Spades to prowl around outside while I ate my dinner. Chapter 29. 26 hours after spotting the raven, I curled into my bed, happy to be clean and full, though the man-goat smell lingered its way through my cracked windows. Spades picked at a small shred of leftover ham from my plate. Tomorrow was going to be another busy day. With Maddie absent, the chores would fall on my shoulders alone. I knew TC would be waiting to know what happened, but I was pooped. I sent him a consoling text and told him I'd call him in the morning. Spades took his place by my feet and coiled into a ball. I switched off the lights and burrowed deep into my heated blankets. Sleep set in before I could remember to put my phone back on the desk. I dreamed of Christy. She wasn't a new feature in my dreams, but this time the mood was different. She wasn't a child. Instead, Christy was my age. She stood in front of a bookstore window, looking through the glass. My dream self smiled and waved to her from inside the shop. She was beautiful, healthy, and happy. I was overjoyed. I stepped closer to the window and reached a hand out toward the glass. Christy did the same. Before our reflections met, my clumsy arm knocked over the display, and what should fall open but a book of poetry. Even in sleep, I knew what I would see before I looked at the pages. It would be the last story our father had read to us, and the only piece of him I had left. It should comfort me, but nothing could make me love the raven, though the poem would always bring me back to happy times with my dad. I woke up before I saw Christy's reaction to the poetry book and the black bird. I had the most foreboding feeling. My sister needed me. A day later, the doctor announced Nigel died of natural causes. I called TC and relayed the news. "A heart attack? You're kidding me!" Scrub yelled from behind TC. Disappointment lingered in his voice. "What's eating him?" I asked TC. "He likes to be right." TC laughed. He figured we were looking at a jealous lover getting payback. "Scrub made me watch the music videos to both the country song and the other one over and over again, for clues. That's all we could come up with." I half smiled. I didn't see death as a game. Maybe solving it from a distance made it more exciting to figure out. For me, I was racing against the clock. "Have you ever seen the video to Total Eclipse of the Heart?" TC asked. Can't say that I have. It's stuffed with odd imagery. We were at our wits' end trying to piece together the meanings behind them all. None of them made much sense with what was going on the farm. Scrub thought that if we figured out a step ahead, and that maybe we'd save someone this time. "We sort of saved someone," I said. After all, Maddie was cleared and Curry got off scot-free. "Yes," TC said. "And I'm glad we weren't dealing with another murder this time." "Me too," I returned. The clues collided in my mind, and I asked, "Did you guys ever figure out what Alfred Hitchcock had to do with any of this?" Scrub chuckled, his good mood returning. TC filled me in. "Yes, actually. There's a movie called The Trouble with Harry. It has 4 strangers burying and unburying a man for an entire day. Come to think of it, that guy dies because of a heart issue too." My eyes rolled. Of course, when it wasn't a murder, the first clue had summed it all up. How was I to know what it had meant? The raven loved dangling half-clues in front of me and mixing the signals to get me off his trail. If it weren't for TC and Scrub, I may have gone back to not trying to stop him because of his love for twisting the clues. If it weren't for TC and Scrub, I might have given up altogether. After the post-mortem pronouncement, the police contacted Nigel's next of kin, his wife, living 3 states over. Though Colleen informed authorities about Pierce, Nigel's employee, they were unable to locate the loyal assistant. Things were on their way back to normal at the goat farm without me. I ended my week and collected my pay. Colleen didn't include a monetary bonus, but she gave me enough soup to last me through the summer. She also gifted me a jar of homemade cajeta, a caramel sauce made from goat's milk. She and Scarlett told me they planned to hire full-time help at the farm. Colleen wanted to take a vacation. I wondered if running from guilt was the main objective, or if the women would live it up before they too bit the dust. Perhaps it was a bucket list instead of a milk bucket sort of situation. Whatever the case, I wished them the best. Full-time help meant this part-timer was out of a job. I was glad to hit the road. After the Nigel debacle, the farm radiated with eeriness. Colleen and Scarlett amplified the creepy feeling. I was going to miss the goats.
plum, and mustard were stinky, but their frolicking made my mornings close to the same way Spade's tail swishing in the tall grass made me smile. It was like I had a family of two, albeit a hairy, four-legged family. It was going to be hard to leave them behind. TC called just in time to stop me from having a full-on pity party.
"What's wrong with my penny girl?"
My? Had my ears heard him correctly? Had TC called me his penny girl? It didn't matter if it was a slip of the tongue or a subconscious possessiveness. Maybe it was a bit of playful banter. Whatever it was, I needed it. The momentary pick-me-up stopped me from crying over lost goats. "Nothing. Now," I said, being purposeful in my words. I hoped they lifted TC the same way his words lifted me. If they didn't, what did it matter? He'd play it off and never remember them. Meanwhile, my gut swirled with hope. TC took a moment to respond. When he talked, his voice was dark, not at all like I had dreamed it would sound. I fought off a stinging behind my eyes. Instead, I forced my focus on the road.
"I'm sorry to ruin your mood," he said. "We just heard."
Heard what?
"Mr. Joe's been trying to reach you."
Now I was worried. Cell reception dropped when I left town. I'm surprised that you got through. Then again, I'm just about to reach Krebs.
"That would explain it,"
TC added. I didn't hear Scrub behind him.
"He forwarded your mail, but it got sent back. Something about service disruption?"
Curry's accident. I smiled. Curry was one of the 2 postmen in town. While he was under investigation, the mail didn't get through. Afterward, Curry was too traumatized to work. Those who lived on the back roads had to go into town to collect their mail. I hadn't bothered, since I wasn't a full-time citizen.
"Oh, yes,"
TC said, mulling it over just as I did.
"Anyway, you got a card marked urgent."
1,000 thoughts bombarded my brain. And?
"It's from Shannon,"
TC added. A lump cemented my throat closed.
"So, Scrub and I checked online. Mrs. Griffin passed away last week."
My heart fought against the squeezing grief. Mrs. Griffin had gotten me the job at Colleen's. She was a strong lady with a sweet heart. When I'd left her, we'd both known the end wasn't far off for her. Still, I had hoped she'd make it a while longer. Black spots closed in around me. I could feel my van pull to the right, but could do nothing to stop it. The roads I traveled weren't heavy with traffic. If it had been any different, my phone call with TC would have ended in a more traumatic way. Sorrow strangled me. Spades sensed the shift in my mood and climbed onto my lap. I squeezed him close as Godzilla meandered closer to the edge of the highway. My vision darkened. The front wheels of my van went off the road before I had the forethought to apply the brake. Once I did, my VW was already laying on its side halfway between Grayson and Krebs. Spades shook himself. His fur ruffled against my palm. I tried to call out to my cat to comfort him and myself. But my voice wasn't working. Before I drifted to darkness, TC called out, with Scrub echoing his words.
"Don't worry, my penny girl. We're coming to find you."
My penny girl? Even with pain and fear combating for my awareness, those words were sweeter than Mr. Joe's Christmas fudge. The Extraordinary Podcast.
Hello out there in podcast land. This is Scrub with the Extraordinary Podcast. TC is here with me, and you're listening to episode 82. Thanks for coming to hang out. Hi, Abby Normals. We've got a podcast favorite here with us today. Sierra, the Seer Girl, is back.
Hello there.
I want to remind our listeners that the names of people and locations have been changed for the sake of everyone's privacy. Thanks for the reminder, Scrub. What letter are we starting with today?
This letter comes to us from 2 listeners. Betty and Brittany are best friends from the Southwest. They met Sierra at a craft fair last spring.
Oh, really? I remember that fair.
Were you working the fair, Sierra?
No, I was working at the movie theater across the road, but I took my breaks at the fair. Funnel cakes for dinner. Yum.
In their letter, they say, Sierra had been in our town for a few weeks. She worked at the local theater's concession stand. We saw her every Friday night for the double feature. We didn't know it then, but she would be our guardian angel.
Aw, that's sweet.
They continue. One Friday, we were at the movies when Britt had a rush of the wigglies. That's what she calls it when she gets a bad feeling about something. She didn't know why, but once she said something, I couldn't shake off the bad vibes either. Still, we went on with our night. The first movie finished, and we went to refill our popcorn bucket. Sierra was sweeping by the condiment counter. I, Betty, spilled some butter on the arm of my sweater. Sierra rushed to the rescue with a damp towel. Once she handed it to me, all the color drained from her face. Her eyes went wide. Britt remembers Sierra dropped the broom and started shaking.
That's a bit dramatic, but sounds like me.
So you remember that event?
Of course I do. I remember them all. Plus, that's the same day I got my cat. I couldn't wait to get home to him.
Ace? Where'd you meet him?
He followed me home after one of my funnel cake dinners. I shared the last bit with him, and we've been buddies ever since.
Was he a wildcat?
I guess so. After a week of him trailing me, I took him to the vet and had him checked out. Best week's pay I've ever spent. The vet took care of him and entered him in the lost pet registry. 30 days later, no one claimed him. So I got him.
I guess Ace sort of claimed you.
Yeah. I don't know what I'd do without him.
Back to the letter. Sierra told Britt and I to be careful when we left the theater. She even made us call my dad to pick us up instead of letting us drive home. She stayed by us the whole time. The next morning, my dad went to collect my car and discovered the locks had been jimmied. If that wasn't scary enough, a prowler had been arrested beside it soon after Dad had picked us up. He was wanted for several violent crimes. Even though we're unsure that he was planning to harm us, he admitted to watching us and sitting in the back seat of my car, waiting for us to leave the theater. If we'd gone to my car, Britt and I might not be here to write this letter. She and I are convinced Sierra saved us. We wrote in to tell her thank you. So thank you, Sierra. Awesome. Sierra, are you okay?
I just need a second. I might have to keep that letter. Hiya, Britt and Betty, if you're listening. Thank you for writing. I'm touched.
I'm sure they are. Given our past podcasts, I think a glimpse led to your sudden anxiety over the girls.
What else?
Let me guess. Did you see it in the butter?
Bingo. The outline of a wolf.
A wolf?
Yes, and not the cute, cuddly kind. The kind with dripping fangs. Even the omen was scary.
What tipped you off about the car?
Nothing, really. Not about the car, exactly. Just about the journey home.
A clue told you that?
A song, yes. As you know, most of my song clues are in what I call the truck stop genre. They tend to be older tunes, one-hit wonders, or repeated top 40s. This one was a bit of all of them. It was a song I'd remembered my dad humming when he was in a silly mood.
Your dad?
Yes. He used to hum Little Red Riding Hood by Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. It's from the 60s, I think.
I know that song. They played at the skating rink.
That's probably it. It's not cool when a fantastic song becomes a clue for something heinous, but at least it helped Betty and Britt.
There's a reason and a purpose for everything. Are you gonna burst into song, TC? Not a chance.
My stay in the South was short, but actually not too unpleasant. Other than for Britt and Betty's encounter with my talents, I left town relatively unscathed.
It sounds like you gained 2 loyal fans as well.
And don't forget your cat, Ace. I could never forget that feisty feline.
Thank you, ladies, for your letter. Listeners, keep sending in your encounters with the semi-paranormal. We love reading your experiences and investigating the weird. And thanks again, Sierra, for hanging out with us.
You're most welcome.
That's all for the show today. Remember, there's no such thing as normal. We'll catch you next time on the Extraordinary Podcast. Goodbye.
The end. Cracked. Chapter 1. Why is everything spinning? As soon as I asked, I remembered. The world had been turned upside down. Or, at least, I had been turned upside down. My van and I ventured our way into a roadside ditch. My head ached, but not as much as my heart did. A friend of mine had died, and I was wrecked. Death's impact wasn't dainty or indirect. It never failed to stun me. It slapped me upside the head like a frustrated mother with a flip-flop. Death chased me down and punished me every chance it got. Seeing it coming didn't lessen the blow or soothe the sting. It burned even worse, like rubbing lemon juice in a paper cut. Somehow, Mrs. Griffin's death rattled me more than the many that preceded it. Strange, I thought as I waited for the earth to settle. It was the one death for which I was the least responsible. You see, death follows me wherever I go. From town to town and job to job, it never fails to find me, and those I befriend along the way. Not only does death chase me, but it also loves to taunt me. It flashes its omens and waits for me to quiver in my converses. Then I get 24 hours to find out who's going to die. Sometimes I even get less time. Much less. It's rare that I ever defeat the Raven, the worst of the omens. That doesn't stop me from trying, especially once I had friends to help me. TC and Scrub had become long-distance friends of mine. They hosted a podcast featuring the semi-paranormal and more. Guess who got paid for guest appearances? Yep, me. The girl with the Grim Reaper for a stalker. I could almost hear TC's sweet voice calling my name. His slight British accent made me spoony, but that's just between you and me.
Penny?
It seemed to say.
Penny girl?
It said again. I smiled as nausea faded.
Dear God,
TC let out. He wasn't blasphemous. He believed in a loving God and talked to him often.
Scrub, he hollered. She's not answering.
Calm down, man, Scrub said. His voice sounded tinny. It bounced around the room before making it to me.
Penny? Kid?
He called. His voice got much closer to the phone. Scrub? I croaked. Talking made my head woozy, and that's when it hit me. I was on the phone with TC when I ran off the road. Adrenaline made my stomach slosh. Crab apples, I cursed. I struggled to thrust forward, but my seatbelt carved into my collarbone. TC?
Thank God. Thank God.
TC's voice replaced Scrub's.
What happened? Are you all right?
I nodded and wished I hadn't bothered. I think so, I said before bravely opening my eyes. Nothing was where it was supposed to be. I wasn't even sure when my cell had landed. I think I'm upside down. Or at least sideways.
Okay, Penny.
TC's podcast voice replaced his playful tone. He was about to get all factual.
Scrub is on the line with help. We know you're between Grayson and Krebs. Do you know anything else?
He asked. A slight tremor sneaked through TC's professional tone. It's still a bit fuzzy, I replied, and groaned when Spades, my sweet yet psycho black cat, launched onto my lap. He rubbed against my torso. His tail flicked my face. Spades, I gushed. You're okay, my sweet boy. I think she may have injured her head, Scrub said in a low voice. I giggled. That's not a very nice thing to say. Sudden sleepiness smacked me. I'm hanging up, I announced, even though I did not know where my phone was. It had to be close, or I wouldn't be able to hear TC and Scrub when they whispered amongst themselves. Penny girl, TC called out. Stick with me, okay? Don't fall asleep. This has been Tailed, Supernatural New Adult Cozy Mystery, a Paranormal Penny Mystery series, Book 3, written by Sarah Hualde, narrated by Brennan Koenigsreuter. Copyright 2021-2022 by Sarah Hualde. Production copyright by Sarah Hualde.